In a dim little room, a young guy slumps at his computer, staring like he's locking onto a thought everyone on Earth already feels. A screen flickers with a video game, and he leans in, stunned. Because in this world, the main character's mothers steal the show way more than the heroines ever do. Suddenly, everything feels like it tilts. Then a woman's voice slices through the air, calling out to Ray, confirming it's really him, and telling him her daughter has already filled her in. She introduces herself as Maniana and shoots him a confident grin, reaching out her hand like she owns the moment. "It's a real pleasure to finally meet you," she says. A blur of moments crashes past. Maniana glides through a sword duel, graceful and deadly, and then she lets out a soft laugh, praising her opponent's insane skill. Another image flashes in Maniana in a shower, startled for a split second, then a playful grin breaks through as she teases, "Naughty boy." The montage snaps shut in a flash of brutal motion, everything spinning together like a violent streak. In the final scene, Anna's already fallen apart, bruised and teary. She sobs an apology for being a bad mom while her tears stream down her face. And right nearby, a fist slams down beside the keyboard. Back in his room, Ray's face twists into pure horror and disgust. He can only choke out a whisper about how vicious and awful the whole ordeal was. His phone suddenly blares with a notification, one message from the game's management team. He grabs his head and howls in pure agony, still reeling, because he can't make sense of why a character everyone loved would get taken away. He stared at the message on his phone, hope surging through him, and he blurted out, "Could it be? Did the game devs finally accept his request and build a story route where the mothers could be saved?" His hope got ripped apart on the spot. He snarled, then slammed his forehead onto his desk because this wasn't some fresh story twist at all. It was just another new event for the main heroines who already had their happy endings, and he was stuck living the life of a boring corporate drone, the kind whose only real escape was grinding browser games like this. Tears of real heartbreak poured down his face as he pleaded with the cold developers, begging for mercy and asking how long they'd keep turning a blind eye to the heroines' mothers, because he'd truly been a devoted admirer of them. That game was Mal Magia Fantasia ***, Akamama Fan ***, a classic fantasy academy tale packed with swords, spells, and non-stop danger. Sure, it was built for hardcore adults, but the role-playing had people raving. The heroines, each one with her own totally different vibe, were a huge part of what made the game special. But the real reason it blew everyone away was something else entirely. It's basically carried by its killer lineup of moms, those charming older ladies, acting as supporting characters with no separate story roots, yet still landing hard with a passionate corner of the player base. But fate didn't play fair. Most of them got wiped out brutally. Poisoned, slaughtered, mauled by dogs, or seized by ruthless villains who dragged them into torture, and many of them still died trying to protect the protagonist, one heartbreaking end after another. While the game's world throws everyone into despair, Ray still charges headfirst into danger. After his mom's dull, devastating death, he swears nobody gets to lay a finger on his young heroines again, and he tells his partners they've got no choice but to keep moving forward. Back at his desk, Ray slammed his fists down in pure rage. He couldn't wrap his head around why the protagonist wasn't a deacon for the moms. He knew a mountain of players, including him, had begged the developers for a mom route, and yet every single request got ignored. The game still stayed wildly popular, but the fanbase felt hijacked by people obsessed with high school girl heroines, and that totally baffled him. He plopped down in front of his computer, boiling with frustration, and it felt like every last soul, right down from the game's developers to the hero himself, was abandoning the mothers. A dark resolve locked onto his soul. If he were the protagonist, he'd have fought tooth and nail to save them all. Game over, he let out a weary sigh and swallowed the boring routine. Then it was time to clock in, and right as he hit the outdoor stairs, his foot slipped. One wrong move and he went flying straight down into the chaos. He gasped, but the floor never bit back. A plush bed caught him with a soft thud, and when he blinked, he was staring at a huge grand hall, completely stunned. He jerked upright, head reeling, and stared around like, "Where am I?" Dreading that he really did tumble down the stairs, and realizing that this fancy Western-style mansion looked way too familiar, like he'd seen it somewhere before. His gaze swept across the room and locked onto a portrait on the wall. Recognition hit him like lightning, and dread crashed in right after. The truth slammed into him like a wrecking ball. He stumbled back, mind spinning, because there was no way this was happening. He was still trapped inside the game. As the impossible reality finally crashed down, the door blasted open. Wham! A woman burst inside, worry etched all over her face, and yelled that she'd heard his ear-splitting screams, asking if he was okay while calling him by name. Zamania! He locked eyes with her and a wave of pure shock slammed into him. He instantly knew exactly who she was. Right in front of him stood Rosa, one of the game's tragic mothers, and the memory of her crushed him. She'd cling to her son, Demanio, the one treasure she had, even if the whole world turned into her enemy. She stood before him in an ornate room, and with her words, his worst fear finally snapped into place. He wasn't just playing anymore. He was trapped inside the game's world, and she was one of its living characters. This hit him like lightning, no fear at all, just pure excitement. He clenched his fist, practically vibrating with joy at the thought of being ripped straight into Mama Fan, the exact game he'd been grinding for hours. His excitement crumpled the moment a key detail snapped back into his mind. He spun toward the ornate mirror, remembering Rosa had just called him Demonio. The woman stared at him, completely thrown, like she couldn't understand what just happened. The reflection snapped the horror into place. What stared back wasn't his face. Cold dread flooded him when he realized this was the last person he ever wanted to become. This was it, and it was terrifyingly, horribly bad. Terrible when he shut his eyes, memories of the body he'd stolen came crashing in. Demonio Tridal, that arrogant, ice-cold aristocrat. His magic was top-tier, sure, but he acted like a spoiled little bully, picking fights with a hero only to get taken down fast. His arrogance always dragged him to the same nightmare. After he got defeated, Demonio would crack under forbidden magic, lose all control, and die a horrifying death, no way around it. That truth hit him like a hammer, and panic surged again and again. He'd finally reached the world of Mama Fan just to be cursed to the worst ending. His panic got cut short by a soft voice. Rosa stepped in, her worried face plain to see, and asked if he was okay because he looked deathly pale. Somehow her calm presence steadied his nerves. Rosa Tridal, Demonio's stepmother, kept replaying in his head, tangled with her whole in-game past, even though she was just a minor side character who barely showed up in the main story. Even with a tiny role, he knew she was crazy popular with a certain crew, him included. So when she finally looked away, she hurriedly apologized, saying she'd slipped into his room without knocking. Then she finally spilled why she'd shown up out of nowhere, her face tight with worry, like she couldn't stop thinking about it. She'd heard a scream, got scared, and admitted maybe barging in like that wasn't exactly fair. She looked absolutely terrified, and the moment she stood there, Demonio instantly felt her fear in the air. He watched her slip out a quiet, unsure little sound, and his brow crumpled with pure confusion. Then she flashed him a warm smile and waved him off like it was nothing, insisting, heart and all, that it was totally her fault and he didn't need to worry about the welt on her face. Those gentle words detonated a brutal memory. He saw the Demonio's first attack, driving her down and spitting that she was filthy, even though she only chased his father's money. The truth hit him like a hammer. These weren't just memories, they were the ones living inside the body he wore now. The memories keep clawing their way to the surface, spilling the truth behind the whole plot. Because when young Demonio lost his beloved mother, he didn't just grieve, he burned with rage at Rosa, and one brutal memory shows him hurling a drink over her head with pure contempt. Even with all the abuse thrown at her, Rosa never faltered. She kept loving him with the kind of pure, unconditional heart only a mother has. But that devotion turned into tragedy. Because in a vision of the game's final battle, once Demonio fell to darkness, Rosa threw herself between him and the protagonist, risking her life to shield her son-in-law. Her plea got answered with pure cruelty. This corrupted demon twisted his grin into something sadistic, lunged forward, and drove a blade through her while he snarled for her to get out of his way. Rage and fear made him tremble as the vision snapped shut. There she was, bleeding out on that cold floor. Because in every single path of the game, Rosa always saw the same inevitable ending. This brutal future knowledge hit him like a truck. He grabbed Rosa's hands, choking out an apology, and the anguish in his voice tore through the air as he spat that the first Demonio was nothing but filth, begging for forgiveness for everything he'd done, terrified she'd be scarred for life. He scrambles for an explanation, fumbling out that his earlier hostility was just his usual rebellious act, then flashes a nervous smile and swears he never wanted anything but to get closer, claiming she's Mom Rosa. She's left speechless by the abrupt shift in how he talks, so she can only echo it in disbelief. Mom Rosa. Rosa's thoughts race. Then panic hits as he realizes he just called her mom out of habit from his old game life, and he snaps an angry apology to save her from feeling weird. But Rosa only stares down, drowning in her own thoughts. Total shock hits, then her face lights up and she barrels toward him, blurting out how unbelievably happy she is. She yanks him into a fierce hug, tears flooding her cheeks with joy, while she blurts that he finally sees her as his mother. Yet all he can do is freeze, stammering her name like it's the last thing he expected. He's still rigid and totally lost as she pulls him close, and pure bliss lights up her face. As she eases back, his thoughts explode in his head, completely swamped by that sudden touch. Rosa steadies herself, flashes him a warm smile, and tells him to call her mom from now on, then reassures him, claiming she gets it and that she always knew he was a good kid at heart. She tells him to chill, there's no need to rush this, because from this day on, they'll forge their bond as a family step by step. With one last bright smile, she spins around and slips out, and the moment the door clicks shut, he's left alone in the silence. He's alone in his room, and Rosa's sweet interaction replays in his head. His face flushes as he finds himself thinking she's just adorable. Then dread hits hard when the truth sinks in. Someone as kind as her is doomed to die before anyone ever truly recognizes how good she is. His thoughts sprint like crazy, this isn't just about her. Then it hits him. In the game, Demonio was the one who murdered Rosa and Mama Fan. That brutal truth ignites a sharp new plan. If he pushes hard enough, maybe his mother Rosa won't have to die. That realization snaps him into a frenzy. His grin goes wide and fierce as he stares at his own hands, racing with one terrifying question. Does he really have the power to save every mother the original story never even let live? Now he lived in Malmaja Fantasia, everyone just called it Mama Fan. Even after the main heroes fought their way into fate's grip and ripped the lead heroines free, this world still had other forgotten girls, ones who didn't get that kind of miracle. His eyes pinch shut with razor-sharp focus because he finally gets it. If he's going to save the mothers, he needs one thing more than anything: power. He's got one goal in his sights: grab the ultimate power that can smash any enemy, shrug off every disaster, and flip the story's fate so completely that everything takes a new direction. Luckily, even though the original Demonio was a total jerk, his talent was the real deal, and with his high-ranking noble status, he had money and clout at his fingertips, so he threw himself into his studies, devouring books by candlelight. He figures if he trains like his life hangs on it and dodges every step the villain takes, he'll pull off his goal, right out there in a clearing, where he starts his physical and magical training as dark energy begins to coil and swirl around him. With a smug smirk, he makes his call. He lets the game's protagonist handle rescuing the heroines because his mission is something else entirely. He tears into the darkness, unleashing a brutal torrent of power, and he's dead sure that this path will deliver the jaw-dropping strength he needs. He lunges forward, dark energy snaking around his outstretched hand, and with a fierce, almost feral grin he declares it. He won't be the world's original hero, he'll be the one who saves all the mothers of this world, and as he vows, ghostly images of Maniana and the other matriarchs flicker into place behind him, sealing his purpose. The Tridal peacekeeping unit barrels into a monstrous wild bear, and its jaws are dripping as it rips out a deafening roar that shakes the ground. Dread hits hard when they realize the beast is way bigger than any report said, and the question lands: do they even have a chance? Right then, Lord Demonio steps forward, lifts a hand, and calmly orders them to fall back. Demonio doesn't waste a second. He snaps his hand forward and fires off an intermediate spell, Black Dance ***. A lash of raw dark energy bursts from his grip, smashes the bear with brutal force and flings it screaming through the air. Soldiers gawk in shock, stunned that he dropped the beast with one brutal strike, and even more amazed that their master showed up personally to deal with it. Demonio's got his own reason. He's racing to finish fast so he can go praise Rosa. And he can't ignore it. 3 whole months have already crawled by since he was reincarnated into the body of that villainous noble. Back at the estate, the grand mansion of all places, his moves are drawing eyes fast and the staff can't stop whispering. Lord Demonio's been treating the servants differently lately, not like cattle anymore. Gossip keeps swirling while 2 maids shove a cart along one lane's and like, remember when he helped me once? And the other whispers, he's been training like crazy, even went out of his way to put down a beast. Right nearby, a male servant catches every word, face goes hot, and he can't help admitting to himself that this new side of him feels nice. In his grand office, Demonio broods behind his desk, fingers steepled like he's weighing the world, while Rosa stands just behind him with a soft smile thinking, wow, he's finally turned into someone respectable. The reason is crystal clear. Glenn, the current head of the house, is always gone from the mansion. So his son Demonio has stepped up and runs things while he's away, and right here he's wrapping up a business meeting to confirm they've sealed the deal. The meeting finally wraps up, and he whips around to Rosa, shoving a folded document into her hands, then orders her to lock it away in the safe. She snatches the document with a quick, simple yes, dipping her head with calm confidence, then tells him she's stepping away to get the job done. Then the crucial document gets slid into the safe's heavy steel jaws, sealed tight like it's the only thing keeping the world from falling apart. Inside the Tridal mansion, a tense business meeting rages on, wrapped in luxury, but the pressure underneath is boiling. A portly guy from the family crowd, smug as can be, steps up and talks to Demonio like he owns the place. That won't do. Then he straightens up and spits out, Lord Demonio. Then he snaps his focus to Rosa, poring over a document with worry on her face, and the associate immediately challenges the idea of handing her a contract, insinuating she'll just vanish with the family's fortune. His companion jumps in with a nasty lie, claiming Rosa seduced Lord Glenn with her body, and then they sneer and hiss that her womanly skills can't be anything but trouble, because they're dying to see those abilities used on them. From across the room, Demonio watches, his expression carved from cold fury, because he knows Rosa hails from a fallen, broke noble family, and that makes her the perfect target for his cruelty, so she fights through the hurt and forces a painful smile. The associate keeps pressing her pain, firing off that reminder. She's been called a gold digger ever since she married into the Glenn family as their second wife. and he smugly points out how those non-stop insults have clearly wrecked her, then leans in close with fake concern, inviting her closer. His words finally slice through Demonio's control crack. As he clenches his fist and his knuckles turn bone-white, rage sparks and he remembers his old life. Before the reincarnation, nobody except the original Demonio had ever treated her like this, and now he fumingly realizes they only want his father's money. Rage keeps climbing in his chest as he remembers the woman they're tearing down, and to him, Mom Rosa is pure class, dignified, charming, overflowing with love. His eyes flare with protective fury. Rage detonates, he slams both hands on the table, and the two associates jump in shock. One can't believe what he just heard, whispering to the other, asking if Demania really just called her mom with that terrifying look. He jerks himself upright, and dark energy whips around him like a living shroud. Then he spits the truth. If they can disrespect his mother to her face, they don't need their necks anymore. His shadowy power snapped tight around the two terrified men, yanking them off the ground as they gagged and choked in fear. Then his glowing eyes burned with fury as he spat the final order. Now get out of my sight. As the chaos booms through the grand hall, two stunned onlookers bolt in pure terror. One yelling, totally confused, because he was sure Lord Demania was supposed to hate his stepmother. Back in the study, Rosa calmly snaps Demonio out of his outburst, reminding him that if he's next to lead the house, he can't let his emotions run wild. He instantly recoils, looking tiny and guilty as he blurts out his apology, and he swears he only snapped because he saw them disrespect her. Then Rosa's hand reaches for him. She yanks him into a warm hug, her face turning soft with real understanding, and then smiling sweetly. She teases him as a bad boy while asking what he's trying to pull off by making his mother so crazy happy. He buries his face in her chest, and heat explodes across his cheeks. Then it hits him hard that his relationship with his stepmother is actually solid, and a bold thought crashes through him. He wants to flirt with her for the rest of his life. His mind snaps back to why this game even started. He remembers the promise burning in his chest. Rescue every mother in that world, and to do it, he'll have to keep clawing for more power. He can't shake the brutal fate awaiting his character. After the quest ends, Demanio is shoved onto a one-way road to ruin, where the lonely moon hangs over crumbling, ancient ruins like a death sentence. But listen, there's a way to twist destiny, and he remembers a subquest that won't touch the main storyline, yet pays out with the Glenn family treasure, a weapon so rare it feels unreal. With his face still buried in her chest, he throws every ounce of strength he has into snagging it, because all he wants is to save his mom. Demanio sprinted through the hidden dungeon corridors, laser-focused on grabbing a rare weapon, trusting his memory as he cut a sharp right, slammed into a left turn, and followed it up by wrecking the exact statue he came for. He barrels forward, refusing to spare a glance at that room packed with gargoyle statues, because he knows it's just a distraction meant to steal him from the real path ahead. He slows for a heartbeat, shoulder to the stone wall, and locks in his plan. This dungeon is near the end of the game, but he's memorized every step, so he'll take only the right turns, dodge every monster, and slam straight to the deepest level fast. His mind snaps back to being Ray, bent over a glowing computer screen, boiling with frustration. He knew the game like scripture, a maddening obsession that haunted him. He remembers the moments he messed up, and that hit him hard. Leaning on a save point now would feel exactly like admitting he'd already lost back then. Back in the present, Demanio stands before a colossal final gate, and his whole journey has gone exactly to plan. He strides into a colossal pillared hall, then looks up as his prize hangs overhead, snarled in thick chains, a brutal dark blade waiting to be claimed. Meet the demon sword Despina. This blade can crank up its wielder's dark magic exponentially, like it's turning the power dial to hell. She remembers that even though it was a rare weapon in the game, it was basically useless for him back then, because he had an all-rounder weapon that pumped up every single one of his magical attributes. Power erupts through him as he shoots his hand forward, claws the hilt, and rips the chains apart. Click, snap, gone. He can feel it. This blade is finally built for him. Then the last link shatters, and a storm of darkness swirls open in front of his eyes, daring him toward the final task. Darkness twists into a towering, wicked grin of a creature, the treasure's guardian, and if he wants his prize, he's got to beat this monster first. A hulking monster loomed over Demanio, its grin hanging there like a silent death sentence. He didn't flinch, he planted his feet, sword gripped tight, and forced his breathing steady, because this wasn't just any beast, it was Despina's savage guardian, and he already knew every last one of its attack patterns. His confidence lasted about half a breath. Then the guardian snapped out with a brutal tentacle, smashing the stone floor so hard it tore up the ground where he'd been standing a second earlier. He barely dodged the strike, and a spinning shadow barrier swallowed the impact like it was nothing. Then a grin snapped across his face, because if that barrier had lagged by even a second, that hit would have erased him. That near-death scare hit like a truck, proving that game knowledge alone couldn't save him from a brutal win. Then the real nightmare dropped. He couldn't even see the creature's health bar, making every move feel dangerous, so he clenched down harder, forcing himself to remember the vow he'd sworn. His vow was simple: protect the mamas he'd come to love in this new world, and he zeroed in on his opponent fast. This fight wasn't going to be easy. That guardian skin was rock-hard, brutally resistant to both steel and spells. And to make it worse, the creature hung from the ceiling, so his attacks barely even found it. Rage snapped him into defensive mode as he expertly slipped out of a storm of razor-sharp projectiles. And the moment his black magic, especially the spells that commanded shadows, came alive, he radiated pure villain energy. This evil power felt like an old weapon in Demonio's hands. Back in the game, he'd been a genius, but also a cruel, arrogant brute who dominated one thing above all else: flawless control over magic power. Now he was done wasting time, and he was ready to unleash that perfect skill. He kept his eyes locked on the Guardian, holding his breath for the perfect opening, because he knew his chance would hit right after the creature finished its next tentacle attack. The second the Guardian bared its maw for a poison breath strike, Demanio knew it was now or never, so he poured every last bit of magic into his attack, locking on with deadly precision. He ripped out his full power and bellowed the spell's name, **** Black Lance ****. As a razor-sharp spear of dark energy tore forward and slammed the Guardian straight in the eye through its open mouth, ripping a scream of raw agony from the beast. Demonic had found its soul's weak spot. Then that deep in its maw eye got hit clean, because Demanio pushed his spells and mana control to squeeze his power into a razor-thin strip that stabbed straight through the Guardian's vital points. As the creature crumbled to nothing, Demonio yanked up a blazing, ornate demonic sword, then froze, realizing its power had skyrocketed. One look and he knew why. Despina had finished off the Guardian with a single deadly strike. He exploded in joy, knowing he'd not only grabbed a deadly new weapon but also cleared the dungeon. And he swore, with renewed fire in his heart, that this was just another step towards saving his beloved mother. Just as his victory hit its peak, a woman's laughter burst in, and a figure appeared in front of him, saying her curiosity was raging because her seal had finally cracked for the first time in ages. With a teasing grin, she pointed out that her new master was, unbelievably, a mama's boy. He froze, completely stunned by her sudden appearance, and those words slammed into his head. Who was she? Once the dungeon was cleared, Demonio wasted no time. He inspected his prize, the menacing ornate blade called Despina, grinning that he'd snagged it without serious injury, yet his smile faded when the real nuisance that came with it revealed itself. He decides to freshen up before anything else, and a grin hits him. Sure, this world feels like the Middle Ages, but it's got showers too. Then he charges straight for the bathroom. The moment he swings the door open, Rosa, still in the middle of her bath, jerks in shock and blurts out a startled cry, totally blindsided. He freezes in the doorway, heat surging to his face as he realizes what he's seeing. The grand mansion sits in dead silence under the night sky, and that awkward mess from earlier still hangs heavy in the air. Sometime later, Demonio and Rosa take their seats across from each other at a tiny table. Then a suffocating silence swallows the room. Shattering the quiet, Demanio drops his head and blushes hard as he blurts out 1,000 apologies, then insists it's fine, admitting he's the one who messed up by forgetting to lock the door. She shoots back, just as rattled, insisting she's the one who should apologize for dragging him into something so indecent. And as she talks, Demanio suddenly clocks it. He thought she'd explode in anger, but her bashful, humble reaction hits him straight in the heart. It's adorable, and that's exactly the real magic of her charm. She keeps putting herself down, hands clasped tight, nerves everywhere, muttering that he couldn't possibly be happy with what he's seeing, calling herself an old lady with a body that's barely worth looking at. His thoughts burst with heat. He clocks every word she tries to hide, smirks at her cunning little act, and realizes it only makes her even more irresistible to him. To Demanio, she's just downright adorable. He sits across from Rosa, and she teases him as a sweet talker, but inside he brushes that off. There's no way he's buying the old lady talk, because to him she's far more stunning than any ordinary young woman. A tense little hush falls between them in that fancy, well-decorated room. Then her eyes lock onto the ominous sword sitting right beside her, and she gasps in disbelief. There's no way he cleared the whole dungeon alone. She blushes hard, giggling awkwardly like she doesn't know where to look. And Rosa quickly adds that she's heard that dungeon is one of the toughest around, her smile fading into a more serious face. The Tridal family's locked-up nightmare is Death Pina, a demon sword that grips dark magic with terrifying control, and its power is so brutal that nobody can even lift it, so the family head sealed it away generations ago. Rosa clasps her hands and begs him, please, be careful. And when he hears her out, surprise flashes across his face as he realizes her explanation matches the exact one from the game he already knows. She leans in and spells out the legend. Everyone says that Demon's sword isn't just sharp, it has a mind of its own, and that hateful will turns on its owners, driving them straight toward ruin. He almost scoffs at the idea. Surely this has to be some kind of joke, until Rosa jerks her head up in panic, and then a young woman with long, light hair pops out of the sword itself, hovering in the air like she owns the night. Meanwhile, under the sky, Damania heads away from the mansion completely oblivious to what's happening right there. A freed spectral girl drifts in, snags a bag of cookies and starts chowing down with pure joy, practically singing about how insanely delicious they are. He stops mid-step, lost in thought, and then, boom, up pops a young girl from Death Pina, the very last thing he ever expected. So he scrambles his memory and twists through every detail, absolutely sure she wasn't even real in the game he played. He gripped a strange, demonic blade, and it hit him fast. This was the lesson he didn't know he needed. He thought it was just a harmless sword with creepy writing on it, like the game was gonna cut him slack. He'd basically trusted his game knowledge too much. He snapped his focus to the girl who'd stepped out of his sword, then demanded, "What do I call you?" She just shook her head and said she had no name, so he could name her whatever he wanted. He hesitated for a heartbeat, then tossed aside Deathy, picked Pina instead, short for Death Pina. And the instant he named her, the girl grinned and gladly accepted it. Her bright smile vanished in an instant. Danger flashed in her eyes as she confessed she hadn't been out in ages, then dropped a terrifying warning. If he bored her, she'd curse him to death. After that, she dared him to prove himself and even called him her mama's boy master. He shot back right away, yelling that he wasn't a mama's boy. Pina wasn't buying it for a second, claiming he had a full-on mother complex and was absolutely nuts for moms. His flustered look snapped into fierce, fearless pride, and he swore that loving mothers was absolutely not something pathetic. It was his redeeming strength, and he stood tall behind it, shocking Pina, who finally realized. This guy wasn't messing around. Pina hovered beside him in miniature and asked what her master had been doing. He stared at the papers in his hands, set his jaw, and declared, "It's time I start moving from behind the scenes." His whole play was built around the Magic Academy. Everybody knew you became a noble at 16 and started your studies there. So he figured that once the main story finally kicked off, he'd cross paths with a bunch of the mothers he'd been admiring in the shadows. But there was one exception. That mother, one of the game's strongest characters, a massive fan-favorite heroine. He could feel the danger closing in on her already, and he knew that once the main story officially kicked off, saving her would be impossible. So he made his choice right then. He would tear her away from the nightmare of being broken and trained into submission. In the game world of Malmija Fantasia *, a legend rules the skies. Maniana of Elheaven *. The magical swordwoman wrapped in crackling lightning, crowned the * Witch of Thunder. And she's not just one of the game's heroines, she's Monica's mother ***. Her fame stretches far and wide, and she's not just any hero. She's one of the 7 Magia, a former S-rank adventurer, and one of the Royal Knight Order's strongest pillars, proving just how terrifying her power really is. In the game's prologue, she crashes in as a guest character, right beside her daughter, Monica. And after her husband dies, it's just the two of them left, clinging to each other like family is the only thing they've got. Everyone swears she's the mightiest in Malmagi of Fantasia, but then she vanishes fast because she has zero impact on the main story. She winks at the game's protagonist and teases him for staring, daring him that if he keeps making eyes, she'll go straight to Monica. Because even with those few appearances, her spellbinding looks shot her to instant, massive fame. Just when her time in this story feels like it's about to heat up, it cuts out fast. Right in the middle of the game, she suddenly disappears without a trace. The next time she shows up, it's not inside the game at all, it's in the real world, trapped in a battered ruin in the northern stretch of Tridal's territory. A band of bandits bickers and grumbles, furious that their bosses get to steamroll the Witch of Thunder first, but one guy snaps them back, remember the promise. When she's finished, it's their turn, and the excitement practically crackles in the air. Up above, Despina slips down in silence, listening as their crude talk spills out. Then she can't help musing that maybe being a diligent bandit wouldn't be so terrible, especially with that divine body on the table. Arrival startles Demonio, who lurks in the tree shadow watching every move, and she rushes back to report what she found. The ruins look plain, but 4 people guard the front gate, 3 more wait near the back, and there's a hidden passage under the building. She confirms it. Maniana's capture is playing out just like the game. Despina glides in front of him, cheeks puffed as a triumphant grin spreads, calling him insanely useful. He tells her, keep the praise coming, and demands even more gratitude, making her chuckle. She can't stop finding his weird little talk of a past life hilarious, and she decides she's lucky to have been swept up by such a fun, entertaining man. Under the crescent moon, he starts piecing together his fate, then hits the truth after tinkering with everything. Despina Acapina only shows up for him. She lets him touch her, somehow she can even eat, and get this, she can flip into a floating spirit ball. And once he realizes what she is, he decides it's time to lay it all out. His past life, every bit of what he knows about the game, because he needs her on his side to reach his goal. She clocks his intentions instantly, because Maniana's doomed to end up as the bandit's toy. She figures he wants to rescue her. Daimonio confirms it, that's exactly his plan. His thoughts snapped back to the game's original plot. Waiting for the hero and the enemy's hideout was a brutal truth. After Maniana's first shocking appearance, she vanished into radio silence for most of the game, only to slam back into the story at the very end. In the story, Maniana gets hauled under the bandits' control, and it crushes the protagonist to watch her fully tamed, broken into submission, with the enemy's magical pattern burned into her own skin. Because she's utterly loyal to them, the protagonist has no choice but to step up and defeat her. After the fight, Maniana snapped back to herself and the guilt hit like a wave. She begged forgiveness for being a terrible mother, then spent her final breath as the fuel for an incantation. When Monica was crushed by the loss of her dear mother, Ray, the protagonist, pulled her into a tight hug, and together they pushed into the next stage, fighting to protect the world. But when Demonio's voice slashes through the memory, he roars, "Give me a break." He stared at the screen and felt his past life slam back in, young, panicked, hand to his head in front of his monitor. Sick with disbelief that Mamamania got such a brutal ending, desperately hunting for any path where she could still be safe. His face burned red as he clutched his fist, furious beyond words that she'd been defiled this early. Yet deep down, he couldn't deny it also sent a wicked spark through him. No matter how hard he willed it, every one of his wishes died on the vine. He even begged the game's developers, frantic and desperate, to add a way to save her, but his pleas got ignored. Back in the present, Demonio's face tightens with pure resolve. He straightens his glasses and declares this is their golden window because the main story hasn't even kicked off yet. With fire in his eyes, he hammers out, "We're attacking." Under the cover of night, he rockets forward, just a simple mask now hiding his face. Despina drifts beside him, demanding why he's stuck with that flimsy disguise, and he snaps back that the whole point is to keep his identity secret. She clocks his amazing sense of justice. He helps without expecting anything back, and when someone comments, he brushes it off, dead set on one goal. He'll save her fast, say nothing, then disappear because that's the perfect ending in his eyes. As they draw near the bandit hideout, he spots 4 watchmen, right on cue just like Despina said. Despina grins, teasing him for how his heart is locked on Mama Maniana and how it unsettles her. Still, he won't break stride. One thought drives him onward: as long as Maniana's happy, nothing else even matters. He doesn't hesitate, he blasts out his magic, and a wave of dark energy erupts as he casts Black Slave Asterisk, snapping the 4 lookouts into instant bindings. They can't move an inch, and their shocked faces flip straight into helpless terror. Watching the bandit crumple, Despina studies his moves in real time. She spots the spell as fundamental magic, but the sheer punch behind it is on a whole other level. And when she sees how flawlessly he channels it into physical reinforcement, she can't help but stare in fear at what he's pulling off for a kid barely out of his early teens. She shoots him a sharp compliment, "Not bad, master." Then she sweeps the defeated men aside like nothing but lackeys and tells him it's time to move out toward their underground facility. Demonio just stands there silent as stone, eyes locked on the road ahead. Deep inside the same facility, a hulking man in a fur-lined coat, scar slashing across his face, smirks as he prowls up to a line of cells, eyes locked on the one that matters. "You cut a gorgeous figure, Anna," he says with a wicked leer. In the cell, Manian kneels on the cold stone floor, chained up tight with a collar biting her neck, but she still flashes a defiant smirk. The bandit leader watches, smiling like he just scored, saying she's got a full package. Down in the underground facility, the kid in the academy uniform trudged up a stone corridor, and one annoying thought kept clawing at his mind until he couldn't help scratching the back of his head. You get it? Maniana was built to be a deadly skilled warrior. So how in the world did she end up getting captured by just some measly bandits? He kept sprinting, convinced something terrifying had pushed it all into motion. Because the enemy's top brass had sprung the trap, snatched her up, and then ordered their pawns to carry out the cruel humiliation. A vision slammed into his view. There sat a man sprawled in a chair, and he claimed to be the writer Anakichi Yujima. With zero effort, he laid it out. It's crucial to break Maniana down hard using those low-grade old man slime balls. The protagonist flinched because it hit him. It wasn't a twist, it was the writer's sick obsession. They kept chasing erotic scenes and tossed consistency aside, and now he couldn't even stomach the whole mess. Locked in her cell, the real Maniana thrashed against the bonds, begging her magic to answer nothing. And fury twisted her face as the bandit leader loomed over her, grinning and sneering that she looked damn gorgeous while suffering. He told her straight up, her fight was hopeless. That choker wasn't just decoration, it was a special incantation that snapped her magic to zero and even stopped her from powering up her own body. She grabbed her chin and declared she was done, just a grown woman now with a chest that couldn't be ignored. So all she could manage was a furious grunt to fight back. Lean leaned in, smugly guessing all Maniana could think about was some desperate pull toward a man. And the moment she flushed, she snapped for him to shut up, but her body betrayed her anyway, proving that the aphrodisiac was hitting hard. He whipped around to his braided subordinate with a grin and said he was having the time of his life, then teased that even if she was a mother, he never expected he'd get what he wanted with someone this perfect, and that he'd been cleared to do whatever he wanted as long as she stayed whole. She shoos his workers and patients aside and declares she'll be his first. Then Anna's world collapses into powerlessness, her mind snapping to her daughter as dread crashes in, and she can only whisper an apology convinced death is already waiting. Her thoughts yank her back to the past, right to the cravings she never stopped having. She'd always dreamed of becoming a strong, proper mom, the kind who could shield her daughter from every threat and make her late husband look at her with pride. She clutches those painful memories of her climb from commoner to royal knights, an order choking on outdated ideals, only to be crushed by brutal discrimination, day after day, with insults and denigration thrown at her nonstop. Still, she fought her way through every obstacle with pure skill of her own, standing firm for her daughter, taking the humiliation head-on, and pushing through her loneliness and heartbreak without leaning on anyone. The memory of how hard she fought to survive makes what's happening to her right now feel unbearable. After everything she's endured, these lowlifes have no right to lay hands on her. As the band's hand slides onto her skin, she shoots one last whisper to her daughter, sorry for being a terrible mom, and still declaring with all her heart that she loves her. Just as he tries to move, a bolt of steel slashes clean through his hand at the wrist. Then the bandit leader screams in pure agony as blood blasts from the wound. He jerks his head up and sees a dark-clad figure looming over them, sword already drawn, and Anna can't even blink. She just stares in stunned disbelief. Meanwhile, the last bandit erupts in rage and demands to know who the intruder is. The newcomer doesn't trade words. He rockets forward in a blur, swats the subordinate's attack aside, then hammers the injured leader, who spits out a raw curse through the pain. The bandit leader isn't done yet. He whips around and bolts down the corridor, and then a tiny winged creature swoops in, shouting that he's getting away with something crucial, so the protagonist launches into a full-on chase right away. The bandit leader bolts through the stone passage, gripping a dark, spherical object, while behind him the captive Maniana stares in sheer confusion, totally clueless about what's about to happen. His desperate escape gets snatched away by a shadowy blur. Then a blade whistles in and slices clean through his ankle, dropping him hard to the ground as he screams in agony. While he's riding across the floor, a shadowy figure in a dark, high-collared coat hovers over him with a jagged blade in hand, and the bandit leader panics, swearing he's done nothing wrong, insisting he was only taking orders from above and begging to know who attacked him. He snaps into action, raises the orb, and blurts out his plan. This cursed thing will shut the woman's power down, so he offers it as his last-ditch bribe. Prostrating on the cold stone, he shoves the orb ahead, go on, it's yours. And then he screams at the masked man, pleading for mercy for himself and his men. The masked man stayed stone quiet, while the young woman with the winged hairpiece popped in beside him, snapped at him to say something, and then shoved the bandit off as a pathetic, substandard liar. Her words slice right through his focus, and the masked man's face reddens as a dangerous thought slams into his head. Can he finally do what he wants to the captive woman? Beside him, his little round companion gapes in total disbelief. But that instant of doubt cracks. Then with a sharp cry, the swordsman whips his blade in a brutal arc, slices the bandit's head clean off, and flings the cursed tool skidding through the air. He calmly snatches the orb, his face turning ice cold as he spits, "You scumbag," then demands what that guy took women for. Right beside him, his round little buddy turns to the winged girl and asks if the swordsman looked torn about the deal. She shoots back, "Nope, not at all." What? In a cold stone cell, broken shackles scattered across the floor, Maniana sits in near nothing, cheeks blazing with embarrassment. Then a masked swordsman slips in, throws his dark coat over her shoulders, and covers her up. She tilts her head toward the rescuer, cheeks burning hot, sweat slick on her skin, and she stammers out a barely audible "thank you." He starts to panic, checking if his captor actually hurt her, and Maniana quickly reassures him. She's okay, and they never managed to do anything, so he finally exhales after that terrifying close call, while his little round buddy just stares in awe, instantly recognizing her as Mama Mania. She looks up at him, still burning with embarrassment, and asks if she could learn his name. He brushes off the question and snaps that his name isn't worth saying, then tells her to just think of him as a man completely smitten with her. And that shocking confession leaves his floating companion reeling. Another word, then he scoops her up in his arms, and Maniana blurts out a sharp, startled cry, totally rattled by what he's doing and what he just said. He yells at her to hang on tight, then sprints down a long stone corridor lined with prison cells, hauling her toward safety. While he carries her, Maniana gets hit by a deep thought. She stares at her rescuer's fearless face and suddenly wonders, when was the last time anyone risked everything just to protect her? He guides her to a plain tent hammered into a nasty little clearing, lays her down with surprising care, and tells her it's his time to rest. Anna blurts out frantic apologies because her body feels burning hot for reasons she can't explain. He keeps watch over the resting Maniana, convinced she's finally safe and his mission is done, so he waits for the perfect moment to slip out once she falls asleep. But the second he steels himself, he clutches his chest, feeling the brutal weight of what he's about to do. And just as the pain rips through him, Maniana's cry breaks the silence in her sleep. His resolve wavered as he hesitated at the tent's entrance. Then inside, Maniana's eyes flickered open, a crimson blush bursting across her cheeks while she let out a soft, breathy sigh. He ended up towering over her, fighting an unstoppable weight as terror sank in. This was bad, real bad. Those devastating pheromones were flooding his mind, ripping every last shred of control away. His whole body shook with strain, heat surged up his face, and he stuttered out, begging them to call it a misunderstanding. Anything but the truth. Outside the tent, the round companion drifted through the moonlit forest, eyes bulging with shock at all that chaos roaring from within. It gasped, chanting that he was a beast, and then stared in awe, stunned that this whole performance was even more incredible than what its late husbands ever managed. The tent kept roaring without letting up, and their companion snapped with impatience, wailing that it wasn't even close to being satisfied, asking how many years it had been overdue and when they'd finally get it done. As the night dragged on, the companion's grumbling warped into a full-on fog of confusion, its mind slipping, getting dumber with every second as it drowned in the tent's echoing sounds. Sunlight clawed over the treetops, but the commotion inside never stopped. Then the companion went full disbelief, frustration exploding into a loud, heartfelt declaration of deep love and total admiration. The moment morning light flooded her tent, Maniana shot upright, hands clamped over her mouth in pure horror. "What have I done?" she breathed, staring at a tiny, newborn-like figure resting peacefully on the bed. Panic flashed in her eyes, then snapped to the swordsman sprawled beside her, dead asleep. She leaned in close and whispered, "Are you okay?" with pure worry in every word. He slowly cracked his eyes open, and peace and gratitude flooded his face. Then he clasped his hands together and poured out his heartfelt thanks. Tears blur her vision as Maniana throws herself into frantic apologies, admitting that yes, an aphrodisiac nudged her. But she still won't dodge the blame for forcing herself on that young man, and when she drops to her knees, she confesses the unthinkable. Even after he saved her from the bandits, she let her lust take the wheel and crossed a line she can never take back. She bows so low it's like she's begging for mercy, swearing she'll do anything to fix what she did, while Ray just watches, already weighing what he needs to do next. His internal thoughts are spotless, and a confident smirk spreads across his face. He loved every second of it, and the gratitude hits so hard he wouldn't think twice about paying her for the experience. He tells her to lift her chin, then quietly admits this mess isn't as simple as he's been pretending. He locks eyes with her and flat out says it was just an accident between them, like it means absolutely nothing and it doesn't bother him one bit. Vaniana yelps in shock, snapping that his careless dismissal won't fly, and she scrambles to yank her clothes back on while Ray stares, stunned. Now dressed properly, she points at him and shouts that he's Demanio, the Tridal family's next head. And then she spirals in regret, thinking of her own daughter his age and how he must have been furious at getting shoved into this by an older woman. Ray cuts in fast, telling her to stop torturing herself because deep down he's still in his 30s. He says, dead serious, that it didn't bother him one bit, and then admits he had an absolute blast, leaving Maniana so stunned she can barely process it. He keeps admitting he feels ashamed for letting her lead and not pushing harder, but Maniana cuts right in and tells him he was plenty manly, packed with energy, and it genuinely felt amazing. She instantly panics and blurts, trying to yank the words back before they land, swearing it'll haunt her conscience, then insisting he has to let her make it up to him somehow. She calls him master, but Ray, still shirtless, refuses her idea on the spot, saying the changes she wants aren't needed. A tiny floating companion cuts in, like it can tell he actually listened. Then it presses him for a favor, and the creature thinks this might finally calm the lust-hazy, mature woman's head, even as that same Ray, in its thoughts, starts doubting the whole thing. At the Grand Tridal Villa, he stews over the plan, then he turns to her and begs for her help. Later on the villa grounds, fully dressed in his dark coat, he finally puts the plan into motion. He corners Maniana and asks if she's truly sure she wants to train him, and she jumps at the chance without hesitation. After 2 months of training, he admits he's hit a wall on his own, no more progress. He praises her sword skills and magic as the best he's ever seen, calling her the perfect master for him. Maniana leans in, hanging on every word. She says yes to his proposal, but a nagging doubt claws at her. Will it really be enough to fix what's broken? He thanks her, and inside he's already screaming with joy. He's got a new master. But then Maniana hits him with a catch. She's never taught a disciple before, and she's brushed off countless offers from powerful nobles, so this won't be easy. Out of nowhere, she explodes forward, blade slamming into the dirt inches from his feet. Ray freezes, completely stunned by her sudden, brutal rush. The hit slams him back, stumbling across the ground. Then she snaps that she can only train him through real fights because she's never once been able to give gentle lessons, and she demands one last time. Is he actually ready for a master like that? He remembers how in the game, Maniana loved the fight, especially against the toughest opponents, and a hungry grin tears across his face as he clenches his fist. "Bring it on," he roars. In a courtyard in front of a grand estate, the masked swordsman launches into a hard clash with Maniana, and he grinds his teeth as he realizes how terrifyingly strong she is. Because as one of the seven Mages, she's on a whole other level, and he can't deny it. She snaps back and hurls a devastating spell, summoning a lightning hammer that slams into the ground with blinding, earth-shaking force. Braces for impact, he shoots up a hand, and dark energy blasts from the ground to block the electrical attack coming for him. As their high-speed duel rages on, Maniana's mind slips back to where he came from. Because the Tridal family, the noble bloodline she knows well, has been birthing top-tier shadow users for generations. Maniana's thoughts lock onto Demanio Tridal, the family's next head. Publicly he's hailed as a flawless genius in magic. Yet in truth he struts like the worst kind of noble, crushing commoners and spitting on the weak. So everyone calls him arrogant, but Maniana can't shake the feeling he's nothing like those rumors. Blades are flashing beside him, and she can feel the raw sincerity in every strike, his noble, unshakable drive to get even stronger. His heartfelt sincerity, plus what he did the day before, and that private moment they shared, smash into her like a thunderclap. Now she's questioning everything, even wondering if the rumors that he's a scoundrel are nothing but lies. A memory hits her like a blast of heat, and her face flushes bright red as she panics, begging herself she never should remember it. That sudden distraction screams for attention, and even though he's thrown off by her move, the swordsman spots his opening. Then he refuses to waste it, whipping his jagged blade through the air like a strike of lightning. His blade streaks true, pinning her shadow to the dirt, and Maniana instantly clocks it shadowbind. She grins because sure it can slow a normal fighter, but it does absolutely nothing to someone in her league. Her confidence just snapped, and a sharp jolt shot through her as her eyes widened in total disbelief, screaming that something was terribly wrong. She lunged to move, but her body locked up instantly. Pure panic surged when she realized her right leg felt welded to the ground itself. The masked swordsman stared as she fought for breath, and then the truth of his technique snapped into place. A normal binding spell would have blasted power all over her body, something she could have shaken off in seconds, but he poured the whole binding force into one single point, cranking the pressure up like a runaway explosion. Maniana felt the realization hit her hard. He didn't just cast magic, he condensed it with surgical precision. The control this young man had, it was downright terrifying. She couldn't believe it. His control over magic felt like a whole different universe. And before she could even finish thinking, he was already charging forward, unleashing a twisting flood of dark energy at her while clinging to a promise he made to his beloved mama. The masked swordsman explodes forward, his jagged blade slicing the air straight for Maniana, and she braces hard for the impact. She fires off a blinding surge of power, boom. A concussive blast slams him backward and he stumbles in shock. He crashes to the ground, his grip snaps, and his sword skitters across the dirt like it's alive. With a twisted grin, he throws in the towel, admitting he can't pull this off after all. He laughs that the seven Magi always deliver, then admits the truth. He still has zero chance against her. Maniana watches, stunned by how upbeat he sounds. She can't stop replaying the moment she got completely crushed by a 15-year-old boy. His talent feels terrifying, and the scary part is he doesn't slack off. He keeps grinding, always pushing to get better. And now she's left staring at the future, wondering how unstoppable he's going to be once his powers finally fully bloom. While his small companion clocks the struggle, the swordsman admits his heart was jackhammering so hard he couldn't even focus. Then Maniana steps in, reaches out, praises how wild his magic is, and tells him he still has a ton to sharpen, because it'd be a shame to leave those skills unpolished. Her expression melts into a playful grin, and she thinks, I was supposed to make amends, so why do I suddenly have butterflies? Then she winks and promises she'll train him hard from here on out, calling him Demania. Maniana demands to be called Master, then admits she has to hide from the night order that she took on a disciple. And the moment she says it, Demonio's whole attitude snaps into terrified seriousness as he blurts, straight up, if there's any chance she could be pregnant since they didn't use a single precaution. She shoots out a playful sly chuckle and a wink, teasing him that if that were true, she'd have him claim her as his wife. His face turns bright red as he snatches her hands and blurts out loud, trembling with emotion, clearly caught off guard by her sincerity. Then Maniana quickly laughs and insists she was only messing around, reminding him he definitely wouldn't want some old woman like her. Earnest acceptance hit Maniana like a shock. She froze mid-breath, cheeks burning as she stared at him, and all she could manage was one stunned, questioning word. She spun around fast, blurted that he was just being a silly goose, and swore she'd been joking the whole time. Then assured him, don't freak out, I already took care of it with contraceptive magic. And he finally processed it like, damn, that kind of erotic wording really showed up in the game. He tried to steady his nerves, but as Maniana strode ahead, a weird jolt hit her, and she couldn't stop herself from wondering what on earth was going on. The panic surged and she gripped her chest, wondering if that aphrodisiac really had slipped out of her system. So once everything was settled, Maniana quietly stepped in and became his master at the Tridal family's main estate. Inside the estate, a noble woman snapped orders to a maid, "Don't spill a single word about the new arrangement ever." She smirked, saying she expected nothing less from Sir Demanio, then praised Maniana's legendary beauty like it was a gift, and couldn't hide how thrilled she was to see her become Demanio's master. Down in the gardens far below, the two kicked off their new partnership at last. With iron resolve, Demanio cupped a glowing sphere of energy in his hands and swore, no matter how brutal the training got, he'd push through for his dear mothers. She watched him, felt the heat rise in her cheeks, and told him that the magic current pulsing near his chest was a little off. He closed the distance and took her hand, then urged her to try right then and there, so she could feel his vibe firsthand. The instant his hand touched hers, a savage jolt detonated through Maniana. She gasped on reflex, and her whole body shook from the brutal surge of sensation. People stumbled back, flustered, and snapped reminders that she couldn't lose focus. While he tried to wave the moment off, claiming it was only training, but his red face and tight composure gave him away as he sat there thinking, what a brutal session. An hour earlier, on a lonely rocky shore, Maniana faced the young man everyone called Demania. He channeled his power and a dark aura exploded around his bare torso. Then he snapped out a sharp cry, clenched his fist, and poured everything he had into the moment. He snapped the gathered force loose and slammed his fist into a gigantic boulder, smashing it to pieces the instant he hit. He stood there gasping, surrounded by shattered stone, and from far away Maniana's voice rang out, confirming he'd finally cracked the technique. He praised him, stunned by how far he'd come, then Maniana leaned in and revealed the truth. Body enhancement is the heartbeat of magic-based combat, a secret every fighter needs. She also reminded him to keep hammering his basics, and she didn't miss a beat. His lightning-fast growth was exactly what she'd expected. He snapped to obedience at once, and inside his mind finally accepted the truth. Maniana wasn't just in charge anymore, she was his master. Their training barreled into sparring mode. When Demanio lunged in with his blade, he realized Maniana wasn't just feeding aggression at all. She coached it with razor-sharp patience, and it completely surprised him. She snapped his strike aside, eyes widening as she recognized his raw talent, because she'd already tangled with plenty of shadow users before. Steel rang as their blades collided. Then she watched him soak up every sword move and body shift like a sponge. And she realized she'd never met anyone who could command their shadow with that kind of exact, terrifying control. A confident smirk tugged at her lips, like she'd just realized he'd already surpassed her teenage strength, and that thought alone felt downright terrifying. The brutal training shredded his stamina. He panted hard, sweat shining across his body, but his face stayed locked on pure, unbreakable determination. Training doesn't stop. Maniana's cheeks blaze red, a sweat bead slides down her temple, and she shudders like the pressure just hit her. She steps up behind him, lays her hands on his abdomen and snaps, "Focus, push that power through your core." Then she warns him it's dangerous but says it's the quickest route to boost his mana, and as she channels her own into him, she forces his body to adapt to the brutal density. A little blush creeps in as she warns him the whole process might hit him a little too hard. Then a jolt slams through his body, and his face flips between shock and pure strain. He stammers, face burning red, and finally admits that touching her chest sends an insanely intense jolt through him. Leaning in close, she hisses in his ear that he can't afford to get frozen from something this small, then warns him, some enemies will use their charms just to drop his guard. He forces himself to nod along, chanting to himself that this is real training and he can't lose focus, while his hand trembles, betraying the battle to stay composed. The fight inside him keeps escalating. He starts doubting every reaction, jaw clenched as it feels like his control is slipping. He forces himself to stay level-headed, to push through the brutal training without breaking. Right then, Maniana's body erupts with tingles as the woman inside her can't choke down her hunger for him, while he fights desperately to blank his mind and sink into nothingness. Later on, the little round companion hangs back at a distance, staring as he trudges along with an exhausted Maniana slung on his back, and the poor creature floats there, baffled, trying to figure out what kind of training could have brought things to this. As we stride toward that grand building, he keeps staring ahead, convinced our master and disciple bond is solid, and that he's dodged Maniana's grim fate for now. But relief doesn't last. Caution tightens like a knot in his chest, because he knows he can't afford to get his hopes up. At the dining table, he sinks into silence while Maniana stares at him, caught in 1,000 thoughts. Then it hits. The only move left is to get stronger. Before he can say a word, Maniana notices his eyes drifting and snaps, "Are you even listening?"
What?
He lays it all out, voice tight, as he admits his fear. Because the story veered so far from the source, nobody can predict what the game will do next. Maniana snaps her gaze up at him, shocked by how suddenly deadly serious he sounds. His fierce intensity crashes into a wave of embarrassment the second he blurts out an apology, then accidentally calls her Mama Maniana, and panic lights up his face. He flails his hands like a madman, trying to snatch the words back midair, swearing it was nothing but a slip of the tongue. Maniana flashes him a warm, gentle smile and reaches up to pat his head, reassuring him that she doesn't mind the Mama nickname at all. Then adds, she'd genuinely love to have a brilliant, cute son like him. This tender exchange doesn't slip by unnoticed. Right from a nearby doorway, Rosa leans in and thrusts her gaze into the room, eyes huge with shock as she sees Demonio and Maniana laughing side by side. Her shock flips into possessive jealousy in a blink because a whole new path just opened up. She grips her necklace tight and one thought burns hotter than anything, I'm his mama. Outside the grand estate, Maniana and a shirtless Demonio wrap up a brutal training session as the rocky ground shakes beneath them. Later on, Demonio storms into the mansion, wiping sweat off his neck and bragging about how intense his training's been, and right away Rosa, his stepmother, greets him with a warm smile, clocking that he's been pushing himself hard. He credits his rise to his master's top-notch training, and Rosa chimes in that the soldiers keep telling her he's been stacking one brutal spell after another, non-stop. He gently warns that staying sweaty will land him in a cold. Then bam, he snaps and grabs his arm, demanding he hurry up and take a bath. Fueled by pure insistence, she pushes it forward. Then he bursts down the hall completely bare, stunned at what just happened, while his clothes tumble behind him in a messy heap. As soon as he's gone, Rosa snatches up his vest, shuts her eyes tight, and presses the fabric to her face, taking a deep breath as that familiar demonia scent crashes over her. Her face twists instantly, because it's not just his sin anymore. Threaded through it all, she catches the scent of a woman who feels dangerous, mature, and shamelessly lascivious. Meanwhile, Demonio sinks into a massive steaming bath, and exhales a long, satisfying sigh like all his worries just melted away. She isn't alone in the water. Maniana, tiny as a little fairy, flutters beside him and demands he rub her back, and he just stares, baffled like, where even is her back? Right as he starts to question everything, the bathroom door groans open. Then two bare female legs step in. Demonio whips his head around and shock hits his face instantly. He gaped in pure disbelief when the intruder whipped off her disguise, turning out to be his stepmother, Rosa. Wrapped in just a towel, she grinned like everything was fine and offered to wash his back, and it totally blew his mind. Before he could even protest, she splashed into the water right beside him and insisted that as his mother she had every right to be there. Then she claimed she was his real mother too, and it hit him like a tidal wave, leaving him completely stunned. And finally, he gave in to the moment, slipping into the warm water and realizing to his shock that the care actually felt really good. His life turned into a non-stop storm of brutal training and loving care. Rosa, his devoted stepmother, kept feeding him rich powerhouse meals to build his strength, while Maniana, his towering master, never let up, hammering his spirit and grilling him until he proved his resolve. Rosa swore a son was meant to sleep with his mother, while Maniana called it a brutal rite of passage, training him to resist temptation. And the moment he pieced it together, he realized these two women weren't just messing around, they were serving him in their own twisted, unforgettable way. And that's how every single day became a grind, relentless training to sharpen his body and lock in his magical defenses, all while Maniana kept a hawkeye on him. As the seasons rolled by, his skills skyrocketed. He sparred hard with his master, unleashed a terrifying dark power, and finally stepped into the world ready to crush monstrous beasts. He unleashed his darkest magic at full power, smashing a monstrous mouth of shadow into the air. Then it lunged in and crunched straight through the creature's head. After surviving that brutal training, the day he'd been waiting for finally hit, and he stepped out in a crisp new uniform for his first day at the academy, grinned at his two mothers like a lock was on the future, and declared he was off. I proudly saw him off. Rosa beamed and told her dear son to take care, while Maniana, ever the master, leaned in and warned her top disciple not to get carried away at the academy. He stood ready to bolt for the academy's gates, dressed in that dark formal uniform, and his two mothers, Rosa and Maniana, sent him off. Maniana beamed like a proud sunrise, her eyes flashing with joy. Even with a calm face, that emotional goodbye rattled him. He clutched his head and quietly admitted he was going to miss them more than anything. Moments later, tucked inside the carriage, his little companion drifted beside him and shot, "So, are we finally doing this?" He murmured yes, and the moment the carriage jolted, the wheels clanked to life as they started rolling. As soon as the journey kicked off, his attitude snapped into something colder. Because joining the academy meant the Mama fan main story was finally starting, and he already knew it would end with his beloved mother getting treated horribly. A dark, determined grin snapped onto his face. Then he clenched the moment like a promise, vowing to flip everything upside down. Deep in the training capital, the No Blessing Magic Academy rises like a legend, one of the finest schools in the whole country. Its halls welcome a fresh batch of students, and the announcer booms, congratulating them on joining. because this elite school packed with royalty and nobles has forged countless legendary names for the Knight's Order and a ministry too. Then the instructor steps up and tells the whole crowd of students, "You're all taking entrance exams to see where you get placed." And he leans in with a blunt warning. "This year's tests have gone way through the roof in difficulty, so you'd better go all in." Exams kick off with a magic appraisal. Then Demonio tries his turn, and the appraisal crystal shatters from the raw force pouring off him, and right after that he sinks into the written test, locked in and deadly calm. When the practicals start, the arrival student struts in claiming he's the eldest son of House Mace. Then he blasts an intermediate fire spell, a blaze arrow, swearing he won't lose to Demonio, only for him to get effortlessly parried the whole time, right through the swordsmanship portion of the exam. It slams into him with overwhelming force, and he unleashes an advanced black magic spell called Blackfang, while the other students stare in shock, realizing it's the same kind of dark magic the Night Sword uses. From the sidelines, Monica's sweat drips down her face as she whispers, shocked by his insane strength. Sure, she'd heard he was a genius, but she never imagined he'd be this powerful. With his performance, Demonio locks in his reputation for good, because when he faces the results, his name is sitting at the very top. First place. Demonio did it, then some. His grades are flawless, the kind you'd expect from an elite noble line. And right beside him, his little companion drifts in the air, staring at him and asking why he hauled himself to this lonely, deserted place. A wild memory slams back, his younger self, grinning so hard it hurts, sprinting toward the house to spill his win, yelling for Mama Rosa and Mama Maniana as he proudly announces he took first place in his very first exams. Right then the two women get the news. Maniana calmly sips her tea, saying it's exactly what she'd expect from her disciple, while Rosa clasps her hands, overflowing with pride, and cheers, "My son, congratulations." She and Rosa burst into radiant pride, smashing their faces to the window like they couldn't stop smiling, and the whole scene practically glowed with maternal joy, so much that it totally flustered Demonio, whose face heated up as a little companion watched. He replayed their goodbye in his head. Maniana curled up with her tea, musing about the academy and hinting she might let herself go next time. After all, she wanted to keep an eye on her daughter. While Rosa, clutching a tiny doll shaped like him, soothed him with a softer promise. If things got too rough, he was always welcome to come home. With their support still burning in his chest, he spun around and strode straight for the academy grounds, leaving the past behind him, then clenched his tiny fists and whispered to himself, quiet but unshakable. He had to give everything he had. Determination curdled fast into pure frustration. He'd been shoved into Class C, and the moment the grimace hit his face, he understood. This was it, the real start of the story. As he trudged along, he caught other students' miserable whispers, one hiding his face, mortified about being shoved into Class D and dreading the fallout with his parents. His friend tried to steady him, saying at least he'd ended up higher than the kids stuck in the even worse classes. His tiny companion hovered beside him, stared up in pure confusion, and blurted, "What do these classes even mean?" Demonio broke it down fast and simple. This was all about a hierarchy system. At the academy, this massive, awe-inspiring fortress, everything ran on pure merit. Students were shoved into classes A through E, and your grades decided your rank. This system carved the school into two brutal worlds. The upper-class kids got every advantage imaginable, while the lower classes got shoved into miserable, subpar classrooms. And since students could claw their way up by performing better, everyone fought tooth and nail just to raise their rank, one single step at a time. His companion recalled that in the original tale, Demonio was an A-class student, the absolute king of his year, so the whole moment sparkled with excitement, everyone itching to know what wild schemes he'd cooked up, only for Demonio to shut it down with a hard, flat no. He laid it all out. He didn't want to be cast out, didn't plan to march straight into disaster, and he made it clear he wasn't going to blindly ride the game's events either, at least not all the way. His companion looked like they finally got the plan he'd been thinking through. He strode along the academy's paved path, and his little companion hovered beside him, quietly watching, because it had noticed he'd gone easy on his opponents in the earlier exams. He nodded and said straight up he didn't want to draw any unwanted eyes, because he'd learned the hard way in the game that the smart move is staying low, blending in, and acting like just another average elite. His companion poked fun at him, bragging that even when he held back, he still clawed his way to first place. So Demonio just looked away, stunned that a whole year had already gone by since he got reincarnated into this body. Through intense, no-skip training, he finally cracked his new form open, and the powers he never knew he had snapped awake. Even with this progress, he couldn't let his guard down, because he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't ready to flip the fate of the world just yet, and he needed more power. Meanwhile, deep inside the academy's massive halls, two students whispered like they were sharing stolen secrets. One huffed that a commoner had joined this year, and it clearly freaked him out. His friend snapped in shock, blurted, "Are you sure that commoner's even competent?" Then the first student swore he'd spotted him at the exam venue and flat out warned, that guy's bad news. He brushed the danger aside, snapped that the commoner's blade was terrifyingly sharp, but he was only in E-class, so he couldn't cast a single spell. Elsewhere at Noblesse Magic Academy, in a quiet office, a teacher in a giant witch's hat flipped through student files, and a spark of amusement lit her eyes as she thought about this year's lot, until two names stood out. The Tridal family prodigy, with exam scores so insane they felt unreal, yet whose true power was still a total mystery, and the commoner who couldn't cast a single spell. Maniana, clutching a writing crop, heard the head teacher's warning. One troubled kid and one maverick would crush any instructor, and snapped back, "Then I'll handle it." With a vicious crack of her crop, she swore she'd whip them into shape and pound the academy's code into both of them until they became. In that classroom, the designated IA spot suddenly feels freezing the moment Demonio steps in. Students huddle and whisper about his terrifying face and the nasty rumors that cling to him. Even his tiny floating companion watches, grimly realizing his reputation for being hated is spreading even all the way to the capital. Even with the fear he leaves in everyone's wake, a group of female students marches right up to his desk. One longtime admirer beams that it's an honor just to be in the same class, while another quickly pitches a private magic lesson after school, hunting for an edge over the rest. He freezes in total silence, motionless as stone, while his companion hovers nearby, soaking it all in. Then it clicks. Every person terrified of Demonio has another waiting to chase his power and the fame that comes with it. A companion shot a glance at the Demonio, and then froze, face twisting in pure shock as soon as she saw him, his presence perfectly wrong and somehow unsettling down to the bone. That total lack of reaction screams a message loud and clear. He's not interested in young women, and the companion clocks it instantly, while the students, cheeks burning, decide to scatter back to their seats. Suddenly, the classroom goes dead silent, asterisk crack. A teacher slams a pointer onto the desk, snapping everyone to attention. A terrifying woman stands at the front of the room and fires off the command. She steps forward and tells them, "I'm Gloria, your homeroom teacher this year." Her little companion clocks her at once and silently blurts her name, and Mama Gloria snaps to her senses, remembering the legend of that stern, elite knight and professor. But right away something feels off, because in the original story, Gloria was never the protagonist's homeroom teacher. She kicks off her very first speech, saying, sure, the nobles may be refined and gifted with magic, but raw talent means nothing if you don't train it, and with a hard stare she makes it crystal clear. It's their choice whether they sharpen their power or fade away. Her voice thundered with pure fire, and as their new teacher she swore to crush arrogance before it even breathed. Under her watch, the weak don't just improve, they rise, and the strong, she won't let them stop there. She'll drive them higher than they ever thought possible. She snaps her voice through the stunned classroom, roaring that they better get one thing straight. Are her intentions crystal clear? No one dares move. The students freeze in brutal silence, trapped under the weight of her overwhelming presence. She glances back at their faces and realizes it. She barely unleashed any magic, yet it still crushed their nerve. And that's when it hits her. A class nobility must have fallen off because these people feel painfully amateur. Her thoughts get ripped to shreds when a brutal, intense stare from the back of the room locks onto her. Her eyes fly wide with shock and dread. That piercing stare is Demonio Tridal's. One glance and another student shivers as his eyes seem to rake over her. But Gloria locks on to the truth fast. She knows that look. A seasoned professor, she can read it like a threat, the stare of a man who thinks he's got nothing left to learn from her. Outside the Grand Academy gates, they share a silent agreement no one else can read. Demonio can't stop looking ahead to their next run-in, and Gloria quietly swears she'll make him suffer for every bit of trouble. As he wandered the academy hallways, his tiny companion leaned in and demanded, "Did you see everything in here in your old life?" He swallowed, shook his head, and admitted he hadn't, because back then he'd only ever gone where the game's story told him to. He spots the cafeteria down below and jabs at it, grinning, then tells his friend, "I know the named characters from the game, but I don't recognize most of the kids around me." His eyes lock onto two girls. One is Sakura from Easter Island, the other is Tina, an international student who's from the elves' land. When his companion asks what they're like, he shrugs and just says their mothers are cute. Right as a tray of food gets brutally knocked over nearby, he remembers, those two girls were conquerable heroines in the game. Yeah, they had explicit scenes, but he skipped every single one because none of that stuff ever interested him. A male student shoves his way into the moment and starts berating one of the heroines, barking that a worthless Gerank laggard like her should hide in a corner alone, not sit openly at the table. Then the girl refuses to back down, standing firm and demanding to know exactly what he said as the rest of the students stare. He strode forward like he owned the floor, polished shoe planted right in the spilled meal, then shot out a sarcastic line like, "Aw, what a shame, I still haven't even tried that dish." The girl shot him a glare that screamed pure fury. Then another student burst onto the scene, and Demonio's eyes snapped shut to target. His grin turned predatory as he clocked the new guy, the game's protagonist. He also pinned the girl as Rebecca, one of Mama Fan's main heroines. The newcomer stood his ground, voice rock solid, and declared he wouldn't stand for wasting a single bite of food. The intense stare of a light-haired young man, sharp, determined, and built lean as ever. A shadowy figure keeps him under watch from far away, like they're stalking his every move. A balcony hangs over the hall, and the masked swordsman watches the students below with a sly smirk, because that boy finally showed up. A tiny floating companion quizzed the boy's identity, and the swordsman snapped that he was Ray Brave, the star of the original game. Then with a sudden razor-sharp glare, he hammers the truth into his companion. Ray's a fearsome Lullican bastard, and the shock hits like a punch. A group of students corners Ray, their leader sneers that he's nothing but a lowly E-class swine, and the companion fires back, asking how the swordsman can talk so big when Ray is just a teenager too. Until the swordsman snarls that Ray only targets teenagers, locking in his hardcore reputation. The bully keeps on needling him, roaring with laughter about how he heard Ray can't cast a single spell, then spits that a talentless peasant has no business challenging the nobility, until Ray's face tightens and rage kicks in as he clenches his fists. He yanks out his sword and declares that his lack of magic won't stop him. Right here in the story, Ray is all but dragging behind everyone else, fighting purely with his blade skills. From above, the masked swordsman sneers, sure Ray's big show won't matter, his magic will snap awake soon. Ray has no clue. He roars his vow to crawl to the top of the academy and prove that even laggards can outshine geniuses if they grind hard enough. A roaring torrent of ancient magic bursts out of Ray, because as the legendary hero's descendant, he can learn arts like that. The swordsman even makes a dry remark about how Ray's "I'm just a laggard" speech lands perfectly for someone with a peerless bloodline, and it leaves his companion completely baffled. The masked swordsman and his companion trade grim truths about his old in-game self, Demanio. He admits that in the original story, Demanio gets smashed by Ray Brave halfway through, crumbles to ruin, and ends in a miserable death. His companion shoots back, so Ray Brave is really the one meant to save the world. And the swordsman answers with a hard, grim nod. He's clocked it in his head. If he wants to dodge this death route, he'd better stop poking the protagonist and start playing nice. Because the brutal enemies they're going to face later won't wait, and Ray is a weapon you do not waste. But even with all that logic screaming in his head, he grabs his chest and gets swallowed by pure, brutal emotion, because he can't, not even a little, bring himself to forgive him. Then a memory from his old life hits. Back when he was just a young guy, he sat staring at a computer screen watching Rebecca, the game's heroine, confess she felt lonely, and it wrecked him because he'd felt the same way, and he'd convinced himself that if he went home, he'd be alone too. In that moment, the game forced a decision on him: ditch her now and head back to the dorm, or stay with her until dawn. And when he dragged the cursor toward the second choice, his hand wouldn't stop trembling. Past him slammed the desk in rage, then backed off, because getting in trouble wasn't worth it. Now in the present, the masked swordsman charges down a huge staircase, jaw clenched, vowing to keep his distance from the protagonist as much as he can to save his own head. He's terrified Ray's clingy, smothering vibe will worm into him and take over. Elsewhere, the bully they just crushed and his cronies dusted themselves off, spitting out threats of revenge against Ray Brave. While Ray didn't even flinch as Rebecca closed in, praising him for not letting her down and leaving him to ask, "So what's wrong?" What? He snaps his head up the moment a seething, frustrated bloodlust crashes into his senses, coming straight from a masked swordsman glaring down at him from the balcony above. Eyes blazing with fury he can barely hold back. The swordsman stares at the game's timeline, knowing this is exactly when the protagonist is supposed to meet the young women and forge deeper bonds. Then, 1 hour later, inside the Grand Academy walls, a class is already underway. Gloria the instructor stands in front of the class and demands, who can recognize this wild incantation on the board? And from the back, the masked swordsman whips his hand up and confidently shouts, "Yes, I do." He stands up and nails the right answer, naming the magic sequence of Zoltek, backed by the Yulia's Magic Association. And Ray Brave, sitting right there, can't believe how focused and sharp everyone else is. The swordsman doesn't react at all. He just tells himself he's locked in and doing exactly what a proper student should. His flawless performance had Gloria clutching her pointer, cheeks blazing as she fumbled with her words, because he'd actually nailed every bit of her material, even the careful way he stood in class. Meanwhile, her little companion was absolutely pumped, roaring its approval and begging for the next challenge. She lounged there with a confident grin, insisting Mama Gloria's lessons were the most fun ever. Then she snapped her gaze back, glaring as she demanded what the traitor Demania was really up to. He flashed confidence to everyone outside, but inside he wrestled with turmoil, staring out the window as the weight of every move crushed him. Because the last thing he wanted was to be branded a hated troublemaker, and if he drifted too far off the original plot, all the hard-won knowledge from his past life would turn worthless. Elsewhere on academy grounds, Carol and Mina, two classmates of his, were caught in a terrifying high-stakes showdown. Two older students stepped in to confront the first years. Greb, the redhead, curled his lip and snapped that they'd pay for spilling coffee on his shoes. The girls swore they'd already apologized, but Greb's partner just smirked and ordered them to follow. He leaned in close, his voice dripping with menace, and reminded them exactly who he was. Then snapped that crossing him would get them kicked out of the academy, only to reassure them with the lie that he wouldn't hurt a single one of them. Ray Bray's companion spotted them a short distance away, and the confrontation was totally obvious. Because Greb seemed to relish bullying first-year girls, like he might toy with them until they finally cracked, and Ray couldn't help thinking his parents must be worn out from cleaning up Greb's non-stop messes. Ray Brave shot back that he was stepping in, because plain and simple they were his classmates. Up above, from a classroom window, the masked swordsman and his buddy stared as it all played out. Then the little creature whirled around and asked, "So you're saving them too, right?" He shot out the window with a ferocious glare, and when his buddy snapped that it was rude, he fired back in his head. Look, he had zero interest in girls, but he still wanted to make his mothers proud, and that real meaning of filial piety was something you couldn't grasp until you understood Maniana. Demania hits the ground with a hard thud, dropping into a crouch right between the bullies and his classmates. Carol blurts his name, stunned, while Greb just stares, shocked by how fast it all happened. His arrival hits Greb's crew like a punch, pure disbelief. One of them snaps, "I know that name, the infamous demon from the traitor family." And another blurts, "Wait, are you really the student who topped the first years?" Reb forces a grin and tells his friends to chill, brushing Demanio off like he's nothing but a first year, even if he's a genius. And from where Demanio stands, he studies the crew, watching them closely and realizing this academy runs on a ruthless seniority pecking order, with Class A third years on top. He bows and offers a respectful apology to the seniors. But inside his head the memories explode. Back in the original game, this same bully rose to fame from day one by brutally beating anyone who even annoyed him, upperclassmen included. Still keeping up the act, he dips into a deep bow, says the girls are his classmates, and offers to pay for what happened, practically begging them to forgive him, while Greb watches with a smug little smirk that drips with condescension. So he dips his head as low as he has to, no appetite for becoming some villain people can brag about. While from across the way, other students watch, nod along like this is just what they expected, and shrug him off as nothing more than a passing whim. With a sudden burst of violence, Greb swings back and drives a brutal kick right into Demonio's stomach. Standing over the fallen Demonio, Greb can't help blurting out that maybe knocking out the top-ranked first year will finally make him famous. While his friends stare in stunned silence, one kid's gut-sinking pity clear on his face, and Carol and Mina just watch in horrified disbelief. Rev scoffs at Demonio for refusing to fight back, calling him lame to his face, then lets him off, turning to the first-year brat and ordering him to go suck on his mom's tits. That insult flips a switch, pure terror. So Demanio rockets forward and yanks Grab by his uniform with brutal force, a predatory grin snapping onto his face as fury ignites his eyes, and he spits the bully's words back at him. "I should suck on my mom's tits, you say?" His grip tightened and lifted the bully like he weighed nothing, yanking his face up as disbelief cracked into a stammer. Because that strength had been holding him in place, and he couldn't stop asking himself how much that dark-haired student had been suppressing. That nasty insult kept pounding in his head, yanking him straight back to his childhood. He was curled up in bed, cheeks burning, while Rosa gently coaxed him to sleep beside her like always, reminding him, "Your son sleeps with his mama." What? She drifted off fast, but sleep kept dodging him. He lay there stiff and staring, fighting the urge to scoot closer in the bed. As she slept, she rolled over and pinned herself against him. His eyes snapped wide, panic flooded in, and his breath caught hard in his throat. The closeness hit him like a wave. He jerked back with a strangled gasp and his mind spiraled. Lying on the bed, he battled his own body's betrayal. He had to push through it. He forced himself to hold still, reminding himself he couldn't turn his mother's sweet, innocent affection into something filthy. Was the daily torment Greb had so casually mocked. So when Demanio snapped back to the moment, pure rage erupted and he threw the bully flying through the air. Greb hit the ground hard, and Demanio's roar shook everything as he demanded if Greb even understood what it was like to endure that kind of pain every single day. His crew burst in, yanked him upright even as the days tried to cling, and they hauled him back while promising revenge with shaking threats. Demanio just watched them disappear. With a frost-cold stare, he snapped that his mother's breasts are sacred and must never be dragged through filthy words. And right there, Carol and Mina swooned, wrecked by his sheer power and iron conviction. They kept gushing over him, and it made him squirm like crazy, while Mina confessed she had zero clue what set him off, and Carol stared in shock, like this guy wasn't the same person she'd pictured at all. After that brutal confrontation, Grebel smashed his opponent to the ground, claiming a massive win over a guy who was no joke, the third strongest student of the third years, a real powerhouse of the academy. News of his defeat tore through the academy grounds like wildfire, whispers snapping in the wake of the clash, proving that Damanio, a first-year, didn't just fight Greb, the school's third strongest, he crushed him. And with that, fear started to spread fast, because this unbelievable scoundrel wasn't someone you could afford to challenge. While the students buzzed and gossiped, two camps formed. One guy snapped that the rumors had to be fake, because no brilliant student would ever spit out something like that, but his friend leaned in and whispered the real reason. Greb had been bragging about a woman's chest, and nearby a bunch of girls went weak with memories. How insanely cool Damanio looked when he threatened to shut Greb's filthy mouth for good. Elsewhere, Ray Brave met with an academy elder, and his face gave away the panic. This incident felt like it would only make his fame spiral. And now he couldn't stop wondering what Damanio was really up to, even questioning whether that guy was trying to seize control of the entire academy. Right then, he dropped to his knees in front of Professor Gloria. She'd called him here. Inside, Dread clawed at him, because no matter what he did, she still tagged him as a trouble kid. Was this that unstoppable fate power the game warned about? Gloria stared down with her arms crossed and snapped that he'd finally shown his real colors as an incorrigible child. She leaned in and told him, "I've got so much I want to say, but Carol and Mina already spilled the whole story." She admitted that he saved them from getting picked on by the seniors, so his move looked like self-defense. But then she made it crystal clear that she still couldn't let what he did just slide. With that, she dropped his punishment. He had to sprint 20 times around the field, and she made it clear it was to set the right example for everyone watching. He didn't fight it, just swallowed his pride, apologized, and promised he'd be careful from then on. Her stern face melted into a knowing grin, and she straight up told him he was honest, admitting she'd been wrong about him all along. And with her years as a professor, she could read people like a book. Then she leaned in and softly patted his head, her smile never wavering. Sure, he was a kid with problems, but there was no way he was a rogue. As she turned to walk away, he shot up to follow, then it hit him like a lightning bolt. This was straight out of a game. The other professors would have flipped out like he was a ticking bomb, but Mama Gloria. She treated him like a normal student, just like everyone else. He clenches his fist until it tightens with certainty, his resolve turning to stone as he thinks of Professor Gloria, kind enough to teach, strict enough to push him. And that's exactly why he won't let her face whatever fate is coming alone. He already sees the whole thing unfold. She'll beg her companions to trust her, push forward, and then she'll be left to die. And with iron certainty in his chest, he swears he won't let Mama Gloria get wiped out. A month into the school year, Gloria rounds up the first years at the mouth of a torchlit cavern and fires up, telling them what's next. They'll split into groups of 5 and descend all the way down to the dungeon's 5th floor. Her voice snaps like a command as she tells them, "Don't you dare underestimate this dungeon. Even if it's low level, one careless second in real combat could tear their lives apart," so she slams down a final order. "Stay sharp," then sends them off. They spell it out. Every first year has to do this dungeon exploration during their first term as a required extra class. But for the high-class kids, the whole thing is optional. Even on holidays, while students lose themselves in dungeon dives for hours, nobody from the higher classes steps up, except one guy glaring through the crowd with his arms crossed. It's Damanio Tridor, the only participant from Class A. Gloria strides up to him and demands to know why he's doing it alone, no group at his side. Then she rips into the gap in power between him and the other students, and he just shrugs like it doesn't even matter. He let out a huge, bored yawn while the other students stared, baffled that the top-ranked kid even showed up, because he had one simple motive. If he wanted to stay in the clear, he couldn't afford to get on Gloria's bad side. A sudden, unspoken truth slams into his mind, like a flash from another timeline. Because in the original game, Mama Gloria dies right during this extracurricular class. Deep in the dungeon, the other students are already locked in, fighting tooth and nail. Ray Brave, the game's protagonist, swings his blade and chops through a stone golem, while Rebecca, Monica, and Sakura cut down the other threats and scoop up valuable crystals. Elsewhere, the masked swordsman tears through a colossal wolf-like beast, leaving casualties in his wake, while Gloria, far off, watches the students' progress on a floating magical screen, her face giving nothing away. The first day in the dungeon wraps up with zero trouble, and night crashes down at the cavern entrance, until a terrified voice slices through the dark, screaming for help. "What, Miss Gloria?" She sits down with her students on the dungeon's 5th underground floor, and then bam, a revelation hits. She has children, leaving everyone utterly speechless. Still, she stays calm and tells them it really shouldn't be that shocking. She clicks open the locket and bam, out pops a treasured photo of her daughter Gelda, and then she tells you the little girl turned 6 this year. Fond smile flickers across her lips as she paints Gelda as sweet and perfectly behaved. Then she murmurs that her own daughter couldn't be more different. That rare burst of warmth doesn't go unnoticed by Ray and Rebecca. Ray even admits he's been buried in work for so long he barely makes it home, and you can hear the understanding in his voice. She pushes on, admitting she has to hand her daughter over to servants, and it guts her. because it feels like she's making her little girl pay for her duty as a mother. Then she snaps into resolve, saying she'll take a long vacation right after this class to go home, convinced she has to finally do something truly mother-like for a girl who has nobody else. While she dreams about hauling her daughter to the market and keeping that promised play, Demanio hears it all from a distance. Then his tiny winged buddy chirps at him, sensing the air suddenly change. Your companion suddenly gets hit with this awful dread she can't explain, and out of nowhere a brutal premonition screams at her. Gloria is going to die. Her premonition just locks in the truth, because in the original game, Mama Gloria always stitched her own death flags like clockwork. A brutal workaholic streak, her first day off in ages, family duty calling, and the promise she made to her daughter until she hit every single one. He remembers the brutal timeline. Then the very next day, the enemy's top brass storms the dungeon, hunting the heroines who carry deadly secrets in their bloodlines. And when the students get hit, Gloria jumps in to stop it. In that moment, she'd risk everything to shield her students, screaming at them to trust her, to run, and to get out, because she knew she'd be the one who didn't make it. He couldn't stop the tears from pouring out as he replayed the funeral from his past life. There, in his memory's glare, Gelda, Gloria's daughter, sobbed her heart out beside the coffin, crying for her mother. Grief turned to pure resolve. He swore he'd save her, no matter what, and he'd stomp out those cheesy death flags before they could steal her life. His mind snapped into strategy as he walked beside the other students. Part of him had wanted to skip this extracurricular, but he saw the opening it gave him. If he let the moment unfold just enough, he could bait the enemies into making the next move, then strike back. While the others cheered because they finally got to have a bath, he stayed locked in on the plan. They reached a building split into separate entrances for men and women, and one student blurted out in shock that a dungeon even had hot springs. The next one just shrugged and said the academy must have rigged it for classes. Right before the boys went in, Rebecca jabbed a stern finger at Ray Brave and dared him not to peek at them. Then she clocked how busted the walls looked, and Ray stammered that he wouldn't. That little phrase ripped open another memory for Demonio. Panic jolted through him as he realized this was the same night as the infamous peeping incident. The one from that game where a wall smashes down and the girl's bath flashes in full view. He clocked the danger and knew he'd get dragged into the mess if this kept going. No choice, he had to slip out at any cost. The thought of an adult stumbling into naked teenagers made his stomach twist with disgust, so he spun around and bolted out of the building. He sprinted until his lungs screamed, then finally crashed at a hidden rocky pool, gasping for air, only to spot the winged girl already underwater, staring up at him in stunned surprise. She stayed submerged while he drank in the view, then he caught on. It was a hot spring and joy lit up his face, perfect because he'd been craving a bath anyway. He slipped into the steaming, hazy water, and as the tension melted off his shoulders, he spotted the winged girl right next to him, soaking it all in too. He let out a deep, satisfied sigh and stretched out in the spring's soothing warmth. He froze, eyes popping wide, because the winged girl wasn't there at all. The steaming water held his instructor, Gloria, lounging like she owned the place. Everyone knew this hot spring could rejuvenate you and lock your body up with aches, but that didn't soothe his spiraling panic. When Gloria's surprised gasp cut through the steam, his mind practically screamed her name back. In a steamy hot spring, Ray's piece gets ripped apart when Gloria's scream tears through the air, because someone has just stripped her of her role as the demon professor. So Ray snaps around, panics, and blurts out an apologetic shout. She whips around to face him, cheeks burning with fury, and demands to know why one of her own students is hiding in her private hot spring. He blurts out another shaky apology, swearing he never knew she was here, and acting like some force yanked him to this exact spot. Gloria snaps out a sharp command for silence, then steadies her breath and regains control. She insists it was just an accident and says that as a veteran professor, getting noticed by some kid won't rattle her at all. Ray watches her and for a moment, her bold confidence seems to calm him. He clocks right through her act and suddenly it hits him, she's mortified. But her grown-up pride won't let her admit it, so all he can do is smile at the adorable way she tries to play it cool. She keeps up the act of I'm totally fine. But inside she's venting that she used to be lean and ripped, defined abs and all, and lately work has completely buried her, leaving her unable to keep that body up. He instantly clocks her words for what they are, nervous little excuses, stitched together from worry that she's not in shape. Then he can't help but find the whole thing hilariously cute, like some sweet charm only a young heroine would have. Then she smirks and admits with a self-deprecating laugh that he's out of luck too, because the demon professor's old woman is the one sharing the mixed bath with him. Her thoughts crack open a harsher fear. She knows exactly how her students see her, convinced they'd find her body dull, and still secretly craving the younger kind instead. You can't stand here like that, and you sure can't talk to her that way. Rage sparks as he shoots to his feet, water flying everywhere, and he yells that he wants to know what she's saying. Then he swings right into it, shouting that she's the most wonderful teacher, hundreds of times over, far more charming than any young woman who only has youth to offer. He clutches Gloria to him, his voice blasting with shocking intensity as he admits he wanted to see her naked. With unwavering eyes, he lays out his truth, admitting he's always dreamed of seeing her. And he can't help but mourn that the game he thought he knew never once let the story get that intimate. His words hit Gloria like a punch, leaving her rattled and speechless. Heat rushes through her face, cheeks blazing red as sweat pops up all over her skin. She jolts back in pure shock, stammering like she can't believe a single word he's saying. The outburst explodes in the hot spring, blasting water splashing across the rocky edges. She bursts out of the water, spins her back on him and screams at him for shamelessly lusting after his teacher, while Ray stays under, frozen in stunned disbelief. Gloria fires back with a thunderous roar, swearing she's an incredible teacher, then now dressed. She looks down as her fury drains away into stunned, quiet confusion. Her composure cracks and she can't stop wondering what on earth is happening with this student. Elsewhere deep in the dungeon's lower floors, some cloaked figure drops to their knees, presses a hand to the stone and feels the mana hidden on purpose skillfully masked. The figure weighs whether they've been spotted, then shrugs it off. If the Academy really knew, they'd have struck harder than that. Next, their senses snap to one lone mover, and curiosity sparks as they clock the strange way they carry themselves. In a chilling, stark scene, a hooded fighter in a full helm looms over a masked swordsman who's been dropped for good, while behind them the wall lights up with Thunder Witch imagery and a nasty set of powerful restraints. They just stand there staring as one question burns in their mind. Is this fallen man tied to the chaos the Witch of Thunder caused? The vision cuts out. Then, right on this same night, they're trapped in a dungeon as a huge glowing magic circle bursts to life under their feet, the floor rattling like it's about to break, and they realize their plans are about to get wrecked as Ray, Brave, and Rebecca watch in panic. On the cavern floor, the ground rips open, and the tremor's source explodes. A monstrous multi-headed hydra bursts out, smashing rock and thunder roaring as it surges into view, and the students can only freeze, staring in pure shock. Rebecca's scream slices through the stunned silence, her eyes blown wide with terror as she locks in on what's in front of her. It's a hydra. Her thoughts spin out of control, because this shouldn't be possible, so she can't stop asking one burning question. Why would a legendary monster even show up in some low-level dungeon the Academy claims to run and lock down? The hydra crashes in out of nowhere. One head whips into the crowd and blasts students flying everywhere. And for a split second, Ray Brave just freezes, his face locked in pure disbelief and terror at the sudden wreckage. The chaos snaps away to a surreal, watery void, and a tiny winged girl thrashes and splashes like crazy, screaming for someone to wake up and flip the outcome. Inside a huge training cavern, a monster hydra with multiple heads bursts out and the Academy students scatter screaming in terror, while one girl shouts, "Did you all forget to bring our teacher?" Ray doesn't back down. He storms forward with his sword up and ready, fear swallowed as he braces himself to take on the beast. He lunges into the fight and slams his blade down in a crushing arc straight at one of the hydra's heads. Blade strike sparks off the creature's jaw-droppingly tough scales with a sharp clang. Ray jerks back as the other students freeze in despair, convinced they're finished, until a blazing projectile rockets past them straight toward the monster. The blast slams into the hydra's side, and right then, Miss Gloria bursts in, pointer raised like a blade. She snaps at the students to stop their pointless strikes, tells them they don't stand a chance, and orders them to follow emergency survival protocols and evacuate right now. Brave starts to protest, but Bray cuts him off cold, telling him not to force her to say it twice. Then a storm of swirling energy ignites around her as she steels herself to take on the beast alone. She grips the controls with both hands, terror flickering in her face, and roars at them to leave the beast to her. Then get out right now. Elsewhere, Ray the masked swordsman bursts in, frantic and furious at his own lateness, snapping that he wants to know why Pina never woke him, only for her to pop up beside him, upside down, saying she tried to wake him by smacking his rear over and over. Ray winces, admits she's right, and grumbles that it now hurts like crazy. He spins his head in pure confusion, cold sweat exploding across his skin as it hits him. This attack in the game he knows was meant for day 2, not day 1, and now he's staring at the chaos like, what the hell is going on? His eyes snap to the chaos, students stampeding away from the cave entrance. He clocks the scene in an instant. If everything's unfolding right, this is exactly the escape moment Mama Gloria ordered. He replayed the game's original script in his head, where Ray Brave, the protagonist, could only swallow his own weakness with a bitter sigh, feeling like nothing but dead weight, as if his only chance was to pin all his hopes on Gloria's strength. Rebecca tried to calm him down, swearing Gloria would be fine and reminding him she used to be the ace of the knights. Like this fight was rigged from the start, a no-win showdown. But he already knew the brutal truth. While the protagonist's power still slept, the Hydra couldn't be beaten, and Mama Gloria had to pay with her life so the students could finally escape. Gloria's death was tossed in like just a subplot, a grim spark for drama, while the real awakening was forced to wait until the crisis that hit the heroine, because Ray Bray swore he'd protect his friends no matter what. Memory inflamed his rage. He clenched his teeth, cursing the protagonist for being late and snapping that he'd only be fated to awaken in Gloria's episode. He burst into a desperate sprint, raging at the fool of a protagonist who only managed to awaken his power when young girls were in peril. His route wasn't clear at all. He tore through a jagged rocky passage when a monstrous two-headed snake erupted from the shadows, lunging to slam itself in front of him. His companion's voice sliced through his rush, screaming that he couldn't drop his guard against those brutal monsters. And when the words hit, he swore under his breath, because somehow the beast had already pushed this far past their usual territory. She snapped at him to lock in, to dig up every brutal lesson from his training, and to remember what it felt like when his master's crushing power bore down on him, seconds from a helpless death. With his jagged blade clenched in both hands, he swore he got it. With his resolve forged into stone, he hurled himself into the cavern. While down below, Gloria snapped out crackling lightning, fighting tooth and nail to hold the multi-headed Hydra back, and from above, a dark blade dropped into place, ready to flip fate itself. He slams down like a thunderclap. His blade kisses the earth and detonates a crushing shockwave, cracking the ground wide open and vaporizing those smaller serpent monsters in the blink of an eye. That brutal stretch of effort snaps a memory to the front of his mind. One quiet night under the stars, where Maniana leaned against him, calm and peaceful, pressing into his side like the world had gone still. The memory snaps into focus on her warm, affectionate smile as she looks up at him. And that sweet, close moment hits him so hard his face flushes instantly. Snapping back to the present, he turns that memory into pure resolve. Then with a sharp cry he pivots and carves clean through another writhing wave of tentacles, smooth, deadly, and perfectly on point. While Ray clashes in the fight, his winged partner's voice rings in, all smug, daring him to find a new master before he bites the dust, while he's still doing the deed with the one he's got. Ray snaps back furious, saying he didn't get powerful from luck. He forged that strength through brutal training. He drives forward through the rocky passage, brushing off the thought with a heavy sigh. Love really is blind, he tells himself, and then it hits him. Someone nearby is still reeling from an aphrodisiac, and a sharp wave of sympathy claws at his chest for her. Panting hard, Gloria digs in and squares off against a terrifying, multi-headed Hydra, gripping her huge greatsword at the ready, teeth clenched, as she snarls curses at the filthy beast. Her frustration spikes as she realizes her endless attacks barely leave a mark, and with grim determination she locks in on the truth. Those scales are tougher than any health bar. Even though it felt useless, she still managed to slam the cavern's exit shut with a rock slide. But now she has to stay standing because she can't afford to break down just yet. A makeshift barricade explodes into splinters as the Hydra rockets through, and she's locked in, ready to buy her students even one more precious second to flee. She tightens her grip and braces as a massive tail whips in, slamming her blade with brutal, earth-shaking force. Low scents slice through the cavern air. She gasps in agony, then slams down hard, her strength draining away as she lies there defeated, wondering if this is truly the end of her road. Her eyes snap to the winged hairpiece, knocked loose when she hit the fall, and her mind immediately races to her students, praying they escaped, and praying even harder that the one notorious troublemaker somehow made it out safe too. The instant that hairpiece shows up, memories slam into her, like a hidden locket, one she used to keep with a photo of her smiling daughter, Gelda. Then her mind rips back to that loveless marriage her parents arranged, and the moment his family business crashed, he bolted the country and left her behind with their baby and a mountain of death. To keep that debt from crushing her, she got shoved under the academy's thumb night after night, drowning in work as she toiled long past midnight. Meanwhile, she remembers teaching as a professor felt surprisingly easy, more than rewarding, standing at the front of the class with full confidence, breaking down the toughest magical theories for her students. Right as she's about to head out for work, a fresh memory hits. She glances back with fear in her face, while her little daughter, Gelda, calls after her, and she remembers telling someone to watch her, admitting that something bad had blown up at the academy. Her mind flicked back to a fresh memory, the promise she made to her daughter, Gelda, where she swallowed her guilt, apologized for missing her, and told her the truth. Tomorrow would be her first day off in ages, but she wouldn't feel truly free until the week after. Gelda's expression crumpled with disappointment, yet she snapped herself a smile anyway, telling her mom to go get it and insisting she was totally fine. That memory torched her now. She lay sprawled on the dusty ground, headband gone, crushed by regret, wishing she'd praised her daughter more and played with her longer, and the shame hit like a punch. What a waste. Her grief hit like a brutal fever. Tears poured down her face as she clung to sake just to stay standing, and the one dream she craved most, seeing Gelda grow up, now felt ripped out of reach. She broke down in non-stop sobs, whispering her daughter's name like it was a prayer. "Gita, I'm so sorry, please forgive me." She wished she could have held her one more time, just one more time. As she crumpled in heartbreak, the massive Hydra towered over her, head snapping back, fangs dripping with venom as it charged down for the kill. Just as those fangs were about to strike, dark magic detonated from the ground. thrashing shadow tendrils like living thorns, and snapped the beast into a brutal prison of darkness. A sudden rescue hit Gloria like a thunderclap. She froze, stared up in shock, and a steady voice cut through the chaos telling her, "Go home and hug her as much as you want." The threat still hung in the air, so a brutal wall of shadow slammed into place in front of her, locking her behind an unbreakable shield, and the voice came again, steel hard. "I won't let you die here." The mystery behind the voice finally cracked open. There stood the masked swordsman, jagged blade in hand, with the winged girl watching close by. He swore he'd protect Gloria, then snapped, dead serious and totally annoyed, "You're way too late." And just like that, they were happy. The masked swordsman plants his feet, jagged sword poised, while the multi-headed hydrolones lunge at him, each mouth blazing with roaring fury. From the ground, Maniana stares in stunned disbelief, because he just hurled an advanced spell, and it's something she swore was impossible. He realizes this power is on a whole different planet, so far beyond high level that it might as well be untouchable, a strength only a few knights in the entire order can even hold. Back inside the cavern, Despina blurts that they barely escaped. Maniana's still reeling, staring like, "Your power isn't something a student should even have," because he's teleporting through shadows like it's nothing. She tightens her grip on her cloak, terrified to admit it, what's really happening here. She just nods along with Despina's call, then adds, "Good thing I adjusted everything earlier, locked off the passageway so we could slip out the moment we needed to." Nathan finally spills the truth. He predicted this would happen, saying he's sleep-deprived because he slipped into the dungeon the night before and secretly laid down teleportation circles all around, so they can blast out the moment they hit one. Preparations went even deeper. He admitted he'd secretly tagged Maniana long ago with the teleport coordinates, and now a blazing magical sigil glows on her shoulder. He braced for the worst. What if the enemy sniffed out his scheme early and struck sooner than planned? Teleportation wasn't something you tossed around. It was a top-tier spell that demanded rare skill and a ton of careful prep before it could even work. Just as he starts thinking, a fresh nightmare crawls out. This giant, snake-like monster with a brutal mouth slithers into view and blasts the whole group with a concentrated beam of energy, and Spina screams in pure alarm. A pulse of light detonates like a bomb, swallowing everything in a blinding blast. Suddenly, the ground rips open, and both swordsman and Despina scream as the shockwave catches them. He snaps into action the second the Hydra strikes, whipping the shadowy tendrils from his coat to slam a shield around Gloria. Yet even with that, the monster's power feels horrifyingly unstoppable, like there's no way they can beat it right now. As the dark energy closes in around her, she jolts with a gasp. He's using his custom-made coat to shield her, while he stands wide open to the danger himself. Her face snaps into panic. She blurts that he's fine, then screams at him to get out of there right now, swearing he'll slip away on his own with no trouble. He flatly refuses, collapsing to his knees and weakening fast. Gloria begs him to leave her behind, but he answers by tearing his coat and shirt open, baring his bare chest. He strides up to her, locks eyes with relentless intensity, and reminds her, she just tried to save her students, even if it meant paying with her own life. He keeps going, telling her she truly earned the title of teacher by risking her life, and that her resolve is noble and painfully beautiful, until his words hit her like a wave and tears spill from her eyes. He says this is the exact reason he has to move, and then he rips off the torn remnants of his upper clothes, flinging them aside like they're nothing. Now bare-chested, he stands rock solid and blurts out that he'll protect her, no matter the cost, even if it means risking his own life. Gloria can only freeze, stunned and flustered by the words. Then he snaps his gaze to the sky and shouts at Despina that things are about to get serious. Right as his swelling power rips through the air, and those shadowy chains restraining the Hydra shatter explode with a deafening roar. She steps in front of him, demands to know if he's sure, and warns that if he shoves himself to the edge, her power will swallow him whole. So he snaps back that there's no point if he can't break through, eyes blazing as he readies his blade for a no-holds-barred fight. He unleashes a raging torrent of dark energy, and it surges across his back like living shadows. He doesn't hesitate, he yanks a Hydra head in his grasp, and as his grip clamps down with bone-crushing strength, dark power whirls around him like a storm. Gloria stared in stunned shock, horrified by the mana blasting off him, and then it hit her. His magic had spilled over, yet his shadows had mysteriously thinned out. Like this wasn't just raw power, but something totally different. His voice turns ice cold as he vows the beast will pay for what it did to Gloria, and the instant he speaks, his magic mutates. The energy compresses, snapping from a drifting cage into a storm of razor-sharp blades that shred the Hydro apart. He clenches his fist, his face locking into razor-sharp focus, because now it isn't about holding it back, it's about landing the perfect pinpoint strike. He unleashes his new technique, Prison of Darkness, and Shredder erupts with vicious shadow blades, carving straight through the Hydra's flesh in brutal, lightning-fast precision. After the fight ends, Hydra's body drops back to the earth, and a shirtless demon, back to you, stands amid the cracking rubble before he whips around, dagger clenched, staring down the wreckage. Gloria watches him in stunned silence, her mind scrambling to process what she just saw. Because that wasn't just an advanced spell, he jammed it with his own upgraded, superior modification. And the more she thinks about it, the more her head spins. How is someone this brilliant real, and who is he truly? While Gloria tries to make sense of everything, a cloaked, helmeted stranger watches from the shadows, already clocking that the order will hit soon. Totally unbothered, Demanio declares he'll torch the rest of the monster parts so nothing can regrow. Then he whips up a tiny fire orb in his hands. The helmeted figure decides it's time to go, shocked that all they were meant to do was watch. Yet somehow Demanio just took down the Hydra single-handedly. They start wrestling with what it all means, wondering if this so-called traitor will turn into their next enemy or their unexpected ally. Behind the scenes, Gloria is still tied up, while Demanio brings the Hydra's remains to Ash. With their choice made, the figure whips around and leaves the scene behind, determined to rush back and tell Mother everything. Because every move they made is for the sake of the one who gave them life, Mother. The cave mouth spits out a final burst of light as the last Hydra crumples, and in the blink after its defeat, the whole place goes deathly quiet. Later, a troop of knights storms up to the cave, and Demonio and Gloria, finally free, watch them close in, stunned. He tells them their timing sealed both of their safety. Days roll by at No Blessing Magic Academy, and Sigero sits there clutching a dock in her signature pipe, scribbling the details. After the attack, the Academy and the Order have kicked off a joint investigation, and it all lines up with the festival about to hit. In a quiet private room, Gloria, fully healed at last, drops into a deep bow to Demanio in pure gratitude, and he just stands there in his usual dark coat, palms raised to calm her as he tells her, right then and there, she came to thank him. Across a small table, he faces her head-on, and Gloria doesn't let him off the hook. She calls out the official story, saying the Hydra's defeat was credited to their teamwork, but she insists it was him who finished it alone. Her eyes lock onto his as she demands, straight up, if he's really sure about pulling that deception. He listened while Gloria spilled the story of how she came home after her treatment, and the second her daughter saw her, she sprinted in for a hug, not caring a bit about how grateful anyone felt. Then he just said it plain. Keeping her safe and keeping the students safe was more than enough. That memory hit like a wave, an intense, tearful hug that flooded him with raw relief and unstoppable joy. Tears surged as the memories crashed over her, and she finally blurted the truth. She was so grateful she'd made it, because just one step could have left her daughter alone in this world. With one sudden move, Ernest made the moment happen. Then she dropped into a deep bow, insisting she had to thank him the right way, and her raw intensity totally threw him off as he could only blurt out that he was just relieved everything had turned out okay. She snapped upright, saying her conscience would never be clean unless she gave it her all. I'd do anything, she insisted when he asked. He met her eyes with pure seriousness and blurted his one wish. Let him keep staring because she was just that beautiful. In his head, one triumphant idea soared. He dodged the death flag with Mama Gloria and locked it in so she'd stay his teacher. That weird request hit Gloria and Pina like a punch, stunned, flustered, and speechless, while Gloria stammered, trying to figure out if he really said what she thought he did. His thoughts flipped the moment he spoke, rewriting everything into something way more explicit. He pictured her asking what he meant, then himself boldly pushing the idea that he wanted to see her unclothed. Gloria squirmed in real life, fingers worrying her collar as heat rushed to her cheeks, then she grumbled that young men's libido was hopeless, wondering why anyone would find a mother's body appealing, until, with a heavy sigh, she finally seemed to get it. Across from the young man, she plants a small round device on the table with steely resolve, then snaps that she has no choice. She has to follow the orders of the man who saved her life. The young man stares back, completely stunned. To prove she means it, she starts undressing, tugging up her stockings, then hushes him, no words needed. I know what you want, she says, like a seasoned teacher reading every move. And when she admits he's a problem kid, she finally gives in, resigned to the fact that she can't fight his wishes. She hops onto the bed, cheeks burning, eyes locked on him like she can't wait, while he stands frozen by the door, stone still and mute, utterly lost as if his reactions just vanished. She leans in and asks what's wrong and why he won't say a word. Panic slams into her as a brutal truth clicks. He wants a grown demon teacher, completely humiliated, and he's demanding she seduce him in an even filthier, more shameless way. The truth is, his mind is running wild with a whole different story. He spits out curses at her as a pervert, but tight fear grips him, because he's convinced he can't ever stand up to the person who saved his life. Heat floods his face until it turns a deep, burning red, and right then Pina slips out from behind the corner, scans the scene and tells him calmly, I'll wait outside. After a while, the residents burst into heartfelt cheers and grateful cries, like they finally cleared up the misunderstanding for good. At the Magic Academy of Noblesse, Headmistress Sigero lounges in her office, puffing smoke from that massive pipe, and tells Maniana flat out she's counting on her to deal with the special lecturer, because he's set to start next week. Maniana nods along, her face deadly serious. She says she understands, calls it a real chance, and admits she's been worried about the academy and what it means for her as a guardian. Flustered, she can't stop thinking, what part of her life is Sagura even talking about? With a smug little smirk, he chuckles to himself, saying Maniana's meant to be a guardian now, and that the wild horse everyone used to chase has finally grown up. She straightens up with a confident breath and announces she's finally a real adult now, one of the 7 Magi, and even a noble with a peerage to boot. Then Maniana leans in and adds, "My daughter's turning 16 this year, that's adulthood in our land." She laughs softly, admitting she used to be wild, but time has cooled her down and common sense finally settled in. 2 weeks have crawled by since the dungeon attack at Noblesse Magic Academy, and now on campus, 2 students stare as Ray Brave strides past with his crew, snickering that he's just the E-class peasant who can't cast a single spell. As they move, Rebecca leans in and tells him his role in that incident was huge. She recalls how he battled the monsters head-on, buying time so every other student could slip away to safety. The memory burns bright. Ray, the hero, fought off the monsters on the escape route all by himself, buying his classmates the one thing that mattered, a clean getaway. Rebecca keeps going, telling him the world is finally catching on to how insanely strong he is, and his name is climbing just like it did in the game. Then Monica chimes in, wishing she could have battled beside him, but Ray shrugs it off and says he didn't really do much. A fresh crisis erupts somewhere else on campus. A slime monster has escaped a research building, and it's built to melt only the fibers of clothing. The creature snaps its focus onto a group of girls right away, its strange powers zeroing in on the exact details of their clothing like a bull's. It lunged and splashed that gelatinous mass across Rebecca, Monica, and another girl, and the corrosive goo instantly ate right through their uniforms. Totally exposed and rattled, the girls burst into cries, and Rebecca snaps out in pure frustration as shadowy shapes creep over them. She screams at the boys to quit staring, while the slime tightens up, ready to strike again. On a nearby terrace, Demanio calmly takes sips of his drink, then cracks that young women shouldn't flaunt so much skin in public, and he slyly bends his shadows to cover them. Girls, mistaking his act for awkward kindness, fall hard. Meanwhile, Demanio quietly clocks how perfectly convenient their misunderstanding is. People can't ignore what he does anymore. Those 2 students from earlier even remember how Demanio crushed it in the dungeon attack, fighting side by side with Gloria, and now their minds are flipping. Maybe he's not the villain they thought, because his infamous reputation is finally starting to crack. She stood with the other students on the training grounds while Gloria blared the day's practical lesson, and then she dropped the bombshell. A special instructor would be stepping in because Gloria herself was back at the academy after taking a break. The special instructor stepped up, and the moment he saw her, recognition hit hard. Lady Maniana, one of the legendary 7 Magi. He remembered her daughter was in B class, and when Maniana faced the group, she greeted every student with a confident smile, clearly thrilled to finally meet them. As she waved at the crowd, her eyes snapped straight to him, and that sudden personal nod totally blindsided him. His eyes went wide with shock. That sudden attention hit him like a spark. His face flared hot, and he totally lost his cool, unable to steady himself. Embarrassment burned off fast, replaced by pure fireworks. He couldn't believe it because this kind of twist had never happened in the original game's timeline. Right on cue, Maniana shot him a playful wink, then told the whole class to brace themselves and promised she'd go all in. She kicked off the lesson by breaking down the real basics of high-level magic. Because to sling a powerful spell, you've got to yank forth magic in with full force, then lock it in with razor-precise focus. She insisted it was simple, snapped her incantation into place, and blasted a wall of energy that erased a huge tree far away. From the sidelines, Despina threw up her hands and huffed at Gloria, because Anna's new approach was still the same old instincts and pure feelings, nothing more. After the show blew everyone away, the crowd chanted that the real lesson was simple: pair up and spar one-on-one, like their bodies would learn after a few punches. But Despina and another student immediately erupted in protest, begging her to stop. Sparring kicked off, and before long Despina slammed to the ground beaten, while Maniana loomed over her. Then Demanio flashed a telepathic message straight into Despina's head, replaying how Maniana once trained him. Yeah, she'd been a horrible teacher, but the crazy part was she was self-taught, and she definitely wasn't pulling any punches. Gloria threw herself at Despina's sadness, insisting that Maniana's strength was pure instinct, genius honed by fighting alone. She was a great master to Demonio, but her brutal style was crushing the rest of the class. And just as they were talking, Maniana tore the air apart with another devastating spell, power rolling off her like thunder. Strolling through that grand, sunlit hall, Demanio's mind races, and he tells Gloria the headmistress finally filled him in. Now it clicks why Gloria's strength is so unreal. He'll admit he never would have guessed she was Miss Maniana's disciple, but one thing is for sure: her power is still downright overwhelming. Then he asked how her break went, and Gloria lit up. She'd spent it reading peacefully with her daughter, soaking up every sweet moment, even fussing over her so much it finally drove her a little wild. With a heavy sigh, she admitted it was finally time to return to work. Her smile fades into full seriousness, half her face swallowed by shadow, and she presses him to admit it. She wants to know, for real, if he's 100% sure he wants to keep calling her Miss. As Demanio watches, flustered, Gloria's cheeks flare red and she nudges him about their earlier deal, call her Mama, when it's just the two of them, and he fidgets, then finally caves, blurting Mama Gloria, and they're suddenly stuck in a painfully awkward little bubble of closeness. She snaps the tension in half, whirls around and strides down the corridor, saying they've got zero time to waste taking it easy, while he barrels right after her, close on her heels. As Demanio steps into the grand, polished room, his eyes sweep the place. And there, right in the middle of it all, Ray Brave is chatting with Maniana while her winged companion hovers nearby. From where he stands, he watches Maniana flash a cheerful wave and a wink, and it instantly curdles his mood as he mutters to himself, hating on the protagonist and Mama Maniana. The story slips into a hushed, grand office. An ornate pipe lounges in an ashtray, wisps of smoke curling up like whispers, while a figure in a giant witch's hat sits behind the desk, looming in the shadows. The hooded figure snaps into the light. She's a woman with long, pale braids and a smirk that screams confidence. Then she breezes in, apologizes for the summons, and calls the stunned Demonio by a shocking new name, Demonio Traitor. The impact of his words hits like a thunderclap inside his head. A tiny, angelic version of himself rockets upward, and the moment he spots the woman yelling Granny Sagero, realization slams into him. In front of him stands Sagero Shellhaze, the head mistress of Noblesse Academy, and yeah, she looks young, but don't get it twisted. She's old enough to have kids and grandkids, and her face stays perfect thanks to that special magic, you know the one. She's got real weight in the Order of the Knights, and on the battlefield she's a smoke magic threat. Ray catches himself thinking that if she weren't so old, he'd probably find her pretty cute. From across the desk, he keeps staring at her, and the moment memories hit, he remembers. Back in the game, she was barely a side character, the kind you almost never see. Inside, he writes her off as some grizzled old hag. Then Sagero sweeps his hand and points to a chair like, go on, sit. That thought doesn't slip by unnoticed. While the winged girl reads his mind, she's like, wait, even old women, are you serious? A heat rushes into his face as he fires back mentally that technically not old women are basically mamas to him. Now Ray, Maniana, and Gloria are seated with her. And as Sagero finally takes the lead, she cuts right to it. She wants to talk about the attack from 2 weeks ago, and her questions lock straight onto Ray. She tells the whole story of their heroics. Ray Brave seized the moment during the students' escape and shielded everyone, while Demanio Traitor teamed up with Gloria to smash the Hydra. After her recap, she bows with heartfelt thanks, and both guys instantly look flustered by how formal it all feels. Ray jumps in right away, insisting they only made it through that ordeal because of their amazing work, with not a single casualty. Her smile drops, and just like that, her face turns grim as she switches gears, telling them the investigation finally dug up a real lead on the culprit. Leaning in hard, she stares them down and demands, have you ever heard the name Ultimotor? What? Just as they're about to speak, she cuts in, Ultimatter isn't some rumor, it's a brutal criminal org that's been exploding in power these past few years. And according to her, they're the very reason the Order of the Knights is getting slammed right now. Maniana jumps in with her own sharp experience, admitting she's fought them before, and then drops a vital clue pulled from eyewitness reports. One of Ultimator's leaders is a man who hides behind an iron mask. Sagero takes a hard drag from her pipe and lays out where they stand. Turns out they've finally got a name for their enemy, Ultimator, and even a bead on one of its top leaders. But then she grimly admits the scary truth. They still don't know much of anything about the organization. She keeps talking and then drops the bombshell. This group's top boss is called Mother or Progenitor Mother, and there's a whole bunch of people out there who worship her like she's divine. The winged girl hovers there, stunned, and blurts, wait, did you just invent that whole thing about an organization that worships mothers? He refuses at once, stone cold, and with a grim look he says it straight. Ultimator is the game's final boss organization. Ray Brave's mind races as the truth clicks. Since his fellow students were attacked, the Academy won't let the culprits slip away. He remembers how tangled they were in the game's plot, from an incantation carved into a character all the way to a training submission built to sabotage the Demonia. As Sagero lays out her plan, he finally feels how serious this is. Then she reveals the truth. She didn't call Maniana by accident. She summoned her to quietly run the operation from the shadows and the special instructor gig. That's just a cover for her real covert work on this incident. Maniana's shoulders droop in pure disappointment as her dream of taking the instructor role seriously collapses. And then Sagero cuts in blunt as a hammer, telling Gloria that a muscle brain like Maniana has no business teaching, before ordering them all to keep everything they just heard locked down tight. One of them shoots a question, why are you dumping such a critical job on us? And Sagero, clutching a tray, answers, because I don't want to be the one who stirs up a reckless mess. She lifts her long pipe to her lips, smirking like she owns the moment. and tells them to take it as proof of her sky-high expectations and unwavering faith in what they can do. Just as Ray and the masked swordsman spin to walk away after the meeting wraps up, she blurts, "Wait," and promises that from here on out she'll be calling on them for help and putting her trust in them. He strolls down the corridor, and the winged girl glides right beside him as he whispers Demonio's name under his breath, thinking about how far everything has already twisted away from the game's events. Right when his thoughts start to spiral, Ray Brave barrels up from behind, praising him for taking down the Hydra with Gloria. And that praise hits like a punch, making his fist clench with bitter frustration as he admits the truth. All he managed during the attack was to run away. He thrusts out his hand, voice blazing with fresh resolve, and swears he'll become strong, just like that masked swordsman, working like his life hangs on the next step, so they can chase bigger goals together as academy students. The masked swordsman clocks this scene instantly, because the exact moment happened in the game too, when Ray stared in awe at Demonio's raw power and talent. But then the memory flips, and he remembers Demonio's vicious dismissal, the cold order that told some lowly commoner to stay in their place. His mind snaps to a horrifying flash, those original Demonio thoughts, a sick obsession with little girls. And he can't stop wondering what his life would have become if he hadn't worn that arrogant mask. Right as Ray's hand creeps closer, the darkness churns and spirals. He snaps back hard, wearing the original character's contempt-like armor, and flashes through the kind of venom Demonio would have spat. This sickening idea of being friendly with a commoner makes his stomach turn, and it cuts straight at Ray's sincere heart. That sudden rejection rattles him to the core, and it hits him. He acted exactly like the game character would, and it stings more than he wants to admit. Then a tiny winged spirit swoops beside him and bluntly calls out his personality as the real problem. A tense silence snaps between them as the masked swordsman freezes in place, and Ray, still with his hands outstretched a heartbeat ago, now drops his gaze to the floor, his face impossible to read. But instead of falling apart, a brand new blaze sparks in Ray's chest. He balls his fist tight and realizes a masked swordsman isn't just a genius. He's proof that Ray has to step up too. That hit hard, and now Ray vows to give it his absolute best. Meanwhile, in her office, Headmistress Sigero lets out a heavy sigh, because it feels like fresh trouble is piling up again and again, so she locks in, vowing to watch every foreign enemy closer than ever and ready the countermeasures before they strike. Gloria nods, but then drops the real warning. Sure, foreign enemies are scary, yet they can't let that be all they think about. She reminds everyone, they're at an elite academy, and that's where top-tier nobles from powerful families come to sharpen their skills. As the camera pans to that glittering chandelier, everything screams one thing. These students aren't just here to learn, they come from power. And with so many influential families under one roof, the politics inside this place is a pressure cooker. Among the students, the first years are surrounded by a wildly eccentric crowd of parents. Elsewhere, Sigero studies a document with irritation burning in her eyes, snapping that they already have a guardian who tossed them a downright tricky request. A desperate message comes from a far-off elven village at the continent's edge, where a calm elf woman sits in a sunlit clearing, perfectly at peace. Elvingard strides up and calls her Lady Tiara, then tells her the gate to the capital can't be opened yet. It's been worn down for ages and it'll take days to repair. She listens, nods like she's made up her mind, and says she'll head for the academy the second everything's set, because her whole goal is to go bring Ms. Tina back. A soft, knowing smile blooms on her lips as she stares ahead, and tiny birds flutter around her hands like they belong there. Her expression flickers, that smile tightens into something mischievous and determined, and she lets out a quiet, breathy little sound. Down in the non-stop capital city, life plays out every single day on its crowded, roaring streets. On that very street, Lady Tiara suddenly snaps into a flustered panic, and her elf guard stares on, alarmed. Elsewhere at the Trader family house, their weekend visit kicks off. Demonio slides into the patio seat across from his mom, Rosa, and announces, "I'm home." He smiles warmly and says it feels like forever since they've had a real chance to talk this slow. Demonio nods and admits life's been chaos. But now he's finally got the green light to use the teleportation gates, meaning he can head home way more often. It certifies these gates are real teleport machines, linked to key spots run by the Order. And yeah, most students are barred from them, but the top scorers of the year get special permission. Rosa leans in and says she'd been worried, but she can tell he's really trying his best. Because if he's that brilliant, kind, and straight-up dashing, then yeah, he's probably insanely popular at the academy. Admit's biggest worry was that he might show up with a girlfriend in tow, but Demonio shuts that down fast. He insists he's got zero time and not a drop of energy for that kind of thing. His denial gets snuffed out the second Rose's eyes pop wide. She can't believe it. She snaps that he's really shocked her, bringing home not one but two old women. Demonio stands there totally flustered, while Gloria and Maniana are already seated at the table. Gloria goes first, eyes hard, saying she's always dreamed of visiting his home as his teacher. Then Maniana slides in with a smug grin, declaring that a master's job is to personally escort his most precious disciple. Rosa hears their excuses and lights up. She claps her hands together and declares that her beloved Sunday Monio is finally, truly adored. He watched the women trade words and laughs, a wry grin twitching across his face, and the whole scene felt like pressure cooking in his chest. Then he spun to his companion, Pina, and told her that in his old world, people like them were called mom friends. What? She stammered, swearing he had it all wrong, while Demanio just floated along, blissfully clueless, and happy that everyone was finally getting along. The tense words melted into a warm, lively dinner. Now Monio, dressed in a vest and shirt, started serving food to Rosa, his teacher Gloria, and his master Maniana. And by the time night swept over the estate, the feast was still going strong. That evening, Rosa and Maniana jumped into a steamy bath together, laughing and splashing water all over each other like best friends who couldn't stop giggling. While Demanio tried to settle in for the night, quiet footsteps crept down the hall, then halted right outside his door. That runner-up in the doorway was Maniana, now in light sleepwear, freezing in the hall as her mind spiraled, second-guessing every choice. She even wondered if she could really pin a possible disaster on an aphrodisiac, then gritted her teeth and moved fast before her daughter's classmate could strike. She finally made it to his door, her hand shaking as she reached for the knob, and swore to herself this would be the very last time. Right before she could reach for the knob, another hand exploded into frame and slammed shut around her wrist, freezing her in place. Gloria's hand, still dressed for bedtime, lit up the room and Maniana jolted back, demanding to know why she was there. Gloria snapped right back, firing the same question and insisting it was totally inappropriate to barge into a young man's room dressed like that. She shoved the point home, insisting Maniana return to her own house, because her little kid was still too young, and right now they were off at a sleepover. She and Maniana skid to a halt the second Demanio's door swings open, and there stands Rosa, totally flustered, dressed in way too revealing nightwear. Both of them choke on her shock as Rosa blurts their names back. Then she quickly glances into the empty room and tells them straight, if they're hunting for Demanio, he's already slipped out. The tense standoff spills into the hallway drenched in moonlight, and Gloria, face stern as stone, demands to know why Rosa was in that room. Maniana fires back just as hard, questioning why she showed up in that dress for a visit like this. Under the same crescent moon, Demanio hides on a high perch cloaked tight, face masked, smiling at how perfectly he planned everything, right down to the warning that after Gloria's death flag got flipped, he still needed the follow-up. Then he hears it. An intruder just slipped into the garden, and the moment he senses it, Demanio realizes a rat has invaded his territory. Hunched high on a tree branch, Demanio stared down at the mansion grounds, then tested every watch-alone intruder, because he knows the intruder is here and there's no hiding it, and that barrier around the property will spot any trespasser before they even get their bearings. The intruder jerks his head up, shock snapping across his face when he spots the figure above. He blurts out, "Demanio traitor." And before he can blink, Demanio calmly fires off Earth Lance. The ground erupts into dozens of jagged rock spikes, smashing his footing and forcing him to scramble a defensive magic circle as he curses his own bad luck. With a snap of his cape, he smashes the last lances to pieces, then he's gone in a blink. The intruder spins in panic, scanning the moonlit clearing like a madman, desperate to spot where his opponent vanished to. In the blink of an eye, his blade snaps up and bites into the intruder's throat, and the man instantly panics, begging for his life, confessing he took the job to investigate the Tridal family, the traitor family, all for the money. His eyes narrow as he listens, and in that moment he clocks it. This guy isn't a real threat, just a paid lackey, even lower than a grunt, slotted into Alma Mater like he's nobody. He finally clicks, his enemies weren't stalking him overnight. They'd been digging for a while, probably since the Hydra incident, and they zeroed in on his in-game persona, Demanio, even back then, already spooked by the rumors that he'd been tainted by darkness. He clenches his weapon tighter and realizes this guy probably knows nothing worth our time, so he doesn't think about taking him down. Another plan starts to click in his head. The captive, feeling doomed, realizes he's got nothing for those pathetic bandits, until the intruder, drenched in sweat, cuts in fast and insists he does have one thing. Manio's face twists with pure hatred as he starts talking. He rips into his stepmother, Rosa, calling her a shameless parasite, a filthy pig who seduced his father just to gorge on the family's money. A cold grin cracked across his face, and he dared the bandit to take the woman with him, then pushed it further, offering up that female pig to a brothel as if it was the perfect place for her. He burst into a triumphant laugh in the moonlit forest, the captured intruder trembling in front of him, because now he finally understood and he demanded purpose. From afar, his crew picked apart the whole plan. The winged girl guessed Demanio was trying to make it look like he and his stepmother were on bad terms. The round one nodded hard, warning that if their enemies struck and snatched the thick-eyebrowed mature woman, it would get messy fast. She couldn't fight back. The winged girl kept sizing Demanio up, saying he'd pull any dirty trick just to protect his mother, and those brutal words made his round companion stagger back in pure shock. The round companion rushed in to calm the wrecked young man, insisting it was all part of the plan, while Demonio, drenched in sweat and rattled, silently begged his mama, Rosa, for apologizing earlier for every horrible thing he'd blurted out. That night, once he was back inside the grand walls of his family's estate, Demonio finally let his breathing slow and settle into a deep, steady rhythm. Three of his mothers stood guard at his bedside, eyes locked on him as if they could shield him with sheer love. Then one leaned in softly and urged, "Let him finally get some real rest." Right as they left, a new figure slipped into the room without a sound. Despina drifted through the air toward his bed, gliding past a portrait of a younger Demonio with his stepmother, Rosa. She lingered over him for a beat, her face impossible to read as her eyes traced his sleeping form. Then she turned and walked away. She leaned in again, that tiny smile curling on her lips, and whispered, "The only cute thing about it is the face asleep." The very next day, as Demanio paced the grounds of the No-Blessing Magic Academy, he couldn't help but miss home and wish he'd never had to leave. He almost headed back through the main gate like always, but when he rounded the corner, he slammed on the brakes, barely dodging a collision with a small, startled girl. Right when it stopped short, he stumbled straight into someone else, soft impact and all, and blurted out an apology before he could even recover. He looked up and froze. Standing over him was a towering elf woman with a crown of flowers in her hair, staring down with worry as she demanded, "Are you okay?" She kept gently asking where it hurt, then stroked his head and cheered him for being such a brave boy who wasn't crying, only for him to repeat his apology and admit he'd never been watching where he was going. Right then, a suited man cut in and shouted, "Lady Tiara." She froze for a beat, then gave him a gentle coo, "I'll be there in a moment, don't worry." She whirled to the man and started patting his head the same way, praising him for guiding her to the academy like a champ, until he blushed hard and begged her to stop, saying he was turning 50 this year. She just gave a soft little chuckle at his protest, smiling like it was adorable, and told him straight up that in her eyes every human is basically just a baby. Her words hit him like a lightning bolt. Suddenly a cherubic baby with a halo flashed in his mind, and he knew for sure Mama Tiara. He pulled up her game profile, Tyra Elan Forest, the ancient elder of an elven village at the far edge of the continent. Over 1,000 years old and towering past 2 meters, she was pure scale and power. And yeah, she was one of the heroines, an absolute giantess, with her massive presence as her biggest draw. As he stared at her walking off with her friends, it hit him. She was a wildly popular sub-character among the players. And yeah, that crowd included him. His eyes narrowed to a razor point, then it hit him. Her showing up at the academy could only mean one thing. As Tiara and her guard marched through the grounds, every student's eyes snapped to her like magnets, and 2 young men trailed the moment with flushed faces, whispering that this was it, things were finally about to start. What kicked off was a major chain of events straight out of the game's lore, the convention of the Elven Elfarch. With a defiant yell, Ray thrusts out a glowing magic bubble shield and plants his feet, refusing to budge as a monstrous bird barrels into him, then gets blasted back hard, while he roars that he'll protect his friends. This isn't something you can ignore. Out of the darkness, a figure in a dark cloak and full helmet spots the power instantly, snaps to attention, and knows he has to tell his mother right away. Nearby, his friends Monica and Rebecca are left frozen in shock, staring like, how on earth can Ray use magic? He's left speechless by the damage. His magic has blasted a brand new cave entrance right into the cliffside, and he can't stop staring at his own hands in shock. Ray even starts wondering if this insane power is really his, all while the No-Blessing Magic Academy looms in the distance, watching from afar. Later inside the academy, Monica can't stop replaying what happened. She's sure Ray's magic isn't like any regular spell, and she urges them to hit the library and dig into what it really is. Between the library's towering shelves, Sakura suddenly snaps into a realization while she reads, blurted out loud. She wonders if Ray's ability could be some ancient, lost magic, and it hits her that Tina said something just like that the other day. That thought snaps her mind to a Samartina, and suddenly she's back in her elven village, clutching an old legend about a stranger who once used the exact same power in the Great War. Her grim look says it all. This ability has a dark past, and she knows more than she's letting on. From far away, Ray the masked swordsman watches everything unfold, already clocking that the plot is moving like it should. The hero just unleashed his real power, right in the middle of a crisis that hit the young girls hard, and when Ray's eyes land on him, he steadies the panic with a calm, comforting look. He strides up to her, pressing, "What's wrong?" Tina tilts her gaze up with worried eyes and blurts out that her mom is at the academy right now, and she plans to drag her back to their village. Her voice cracks and tears spill as she stares at Ray, begging him, pleading for what to do next, blurting out her desperate wish to stay at the academy. While down the hall, the headmistress's office looms in the distance where everything is about to be decided. Inside that office, the air feels thick and tense. Lady Tiara, the elf matriarch, sits there stone still, calm yet impossible to break, guarded at her side. Across from her, the Academy's face-off is set. Granny Sagaro and Gloria, stern and unshakable, staring back with deadly seriousness. Tiara Elan Forrest, mother of first-year student Tina, and the legendary elf ruler who's held the throne for ages, sits right now in front of the Academy's leadership. Gloria nods like she's got the request nailed down, a leave of absence for her daughter, and the instructor freezes, stunned so hard she can't believe what she's hearing, while thinking that Tiara's presence is so intense she looks like she's twice as big. Then the elven ruler leans in, takes a calm sip from her teacup and declares, without blinking, that the requested leave lasts 100 years. Gloria stood there in shock, then blurted out, asking if her student had agreed. She couldn't just brush off Tina's wishes. While Tiara kept her voice steady and said, with everything going on, the decision was final. She'd have to step in as the next head of their village, no waiting. Her guard snaps the conversation shut, coldly saying nobody wants the instructor's opinion, she should just obey. That cutting remark makes Gloria clench harder, and the pointer in her hand suddenly slips from her grip and snaps. Granny Sagaro cracks up as the tension finally snaps, laughing at the sheer madness of a 100-year leave of absence, calling it a very elf-like request, and then with a straight face dryly prays the Academy will still be standing a century from now. She takes a slow, thoughtful puff from that long pipe, then her eyes harden as she finally says it. Tiara wants her daughter pulled from the school for a full century. She figures the long wait can only point to the legendary world tree, and the second that name hits, Tiara's fingers start drumming softly on her teacup. Gloria's face snapped into surprise the moment the world tree got mentioned. She knew the old elven legends well, but she'd always tossed that story aside as nothing but a fairy tale. She breaks it down, telling everyone she's been getting reports that monsters on the western continent are getting terrifyingly vicious. And even if the link to the world tree still isn't proven, Tiara's rushed plea screams that something weird, dangerous, and way too serious just started. She lets out a heavy, defeated sigh like she's just given up. Lady Tiara shot Sagaro a warm, gleaming smile, praising her for being so well-read and for doing her homework, then sweetly called her a good girl. Sagaro's bristles flare at the condescension, and he mutters about the audacity of being treated like some helpless kid. Tiara's smile drops fast, her face turns serious as she snaps that kids have no business poking their nose into the world's grown-up problems. Her elven guard pounds the table and says the truth straight. This is their village's problem, and Lady Tina has to step up and carry her priestess legacy. Then she demands the Academy stay out of it. From her seat, Gloria locks it in. This is a holy ritual, one Lady Tiara herself carried out 800 years ago. With a grim, shadowed stare, they declare it like a vow. They'll put the world tree to sleep for just 100 years. As the talk wraps up and the elven delegation finally rides away down the long road, a jagged darkness blooms out of nowhere in the empty air, like something watching in total silence. From his secret perch, the masked swordsman mutters that everything is playing out exactly like the plot, until a hand suddenly clamps down on his head, silencing him. Tina will leave the Academy tomorrow. He gets yanked out of hiding with brutal force, eyes wide as Lady Tiara towers over him. Then she says that weird tickle in her nose wasn't a coincidence. It was him, the same boy from earlier. He freezes stunned when she steps in close with a menacing stare and asks if he's really playing hide-and-seek. He blurts out no, but his thoughts thunder, because Tiara never had any fighting scenes, yet everyone knew she could detect things in a way only elves can. The swordsman stood frozen in silence while the elf Tiara studied him with a sly, knowing grin. Then she broke into a chuckle and said bad boys have to be taught a lesson, confirming he'd been eavesdropping before she unveiled the exact punishment she picked for him. Her smile blossomed into something warm and almost motherly as she let the real twist of this retribution hit. He was seconds away from becoming her baby. In a blink of impossible magic, he got turned inside out, regressed into a helpless, toddling infant with a pacifier. And the second Bobo panicked, the warrior went sprinting off like his life depended on it, while a tiny winged companion zoomed after him, stunned by just how fast that newly infantilized body could move. In the royal capital, a grand carriage screeches to a halt, and inside, a young man introduces himself as Demanio. The elf woman beams, fascinated that he can even say his own name so boldly, then she flips the script. I'm Tiara, call me Mama. From just a few steps away, her elven guard lets out a tired sigh and resigns himself to it, grumbling that it's Lady Tiara's awful habit. Then he can't help feeling sorry for the poor young man, who's probably drowning in humiliation right now. Right then, Demanio's little habit detonates into a shocking glow. He's instantly turned into a chubby cherub baby, pacifier and all, and when he beams, yes, Mama Tiara. As she cradles him, her guard in the back practically freezes from pure disbelief. Tiara settles in and cradles the baby Demonio, cooing like he's the cutest thing alive, while her guard stands there in shock, baffled that a human man could be brought down so easily, until the small floating companion shrugs it off and says, "That's just how Demonio is." What? He won't stop hounding him, spoon in hand, pressing it toward his mouth, pushing him to open wide. Another day kicks off at the park. Delighted Demonio breaks into laughter as Tiara shoves him hard on the swings. Later, she cradles the sleeping baby in her arms, and a calm, peaceful look settles on her face. On a park bench, Bliss hits him like a wave. He's so happy he swears he could just drop dead, and his tiny companion only shrugs and says, "Good for you." At last, the elf guard steps in and snaps at Lady Tiara that she's pushed it too far. Then he warns her even harder about their academy meeting coming up, saying he's sure Headmistress Sagero is someone they need to watch, and Tiara had better tread carefully around her. She whips around to her guard, calls him Sharon, and snaps, "Don't be so earnest." Then a knowing smile slides onto her face as she brushes off his worries and starts to explain, because really all humans are. She stares at humanity and thinks, "We're tiny, childish, and downright foolish, and our time is gone before it even starts." So she's convinced that charging straight at them is pointless, just a fast track to getting completely wiped out. The current charge was rolling in, right as she was pulling up to her suite. Inside a lavish hotel room, the infant Demonito tottered forward, eyes locked on where Lady Tiara was staying, and his little floating buddy practically pushed him onward. He spots her winding down for the night, clutching a bottle of oil. Then she groans that she's totally wiped out and with a flirty grin asks if he'll massage her. A tiny child gives in and scrambles onto her back, and she admits it can't be easy with her bulk. Then the moment hits, and his struggle turns to pure delight as she praises him for snagging the perfect spot. As he keeps working, his hand wanders into a far too intimate zone. Then a flustered Tiara snaps in fast, stopping him cold and blurting that a baby shouldn't be touching places like that. She pats his head softly, thanking him for all his effort and promising a reward. And the infant Demonio lights up with a grin, cheering that he'll do it for Mama Tiara anytime she wants. His upbeat answer flips the mood, and her expression snaps sharper as a knowing smile curls at her lips. She's clearly watching him, thinking, "You're really an amusing kid." Her smile comes from real insight, and in a whole different world, a horned woman steps up to Demonio and clocks him instantly, because that baby act is gone for good. She demands to know what he was trying to steal by playing clown, and his floating partner gasps when it finally hits them. The baby persona was never real, it was just a setup. Back in the hotel room, Tiara strides in fully dressed and locks eyes with a visibly worried student, Carol. Tiara tells her that her guard, Sharon, said Carol is a classmate of her daughter, Tina, and that she was there with Tina during the recent dungeon run. Then Tiara leans in with a soft, probing question. Is Carol here because she's worried about Tina? Her question hung there, sharp and trembling, part vulnerability, part fire. She looked Amanio straight in the eye and demanded to know, did he think she was a terrible mother? He replayed how the air turned heavy and wrong the moment that happened, and he knew he couldn't keep calling her that. His mama tear joke was done. Once their talk finally ended, he bolted for the academy and left her standing there. She rode through the night, and inside her carriage, Lady Tiara stared out the window with a cold, faraway sadness as the world's lights streaked into blur behind the glass. The very next day at the academy, Monica tore into her friends with shocking news. Tina was gone, and in the crack of dawn her mother had already come to take her away. Then Monica hit them with the reason. Her village had decided Tina would be taking a 100-year break from school. The news hit the group like a punch. Sakura's face crumpled with grief as she blurted, questioning whether they'd ever see Tina again, while beside her Ray Brave clenched his fist and his resolve turned stone cold. Ray snapped out loud that he refused to accept it, vowing he wouldn't ever recognize that kind of goodbye. Without wasting a second, the hero's crew tore off for the elven village to save Tina, because her people's customs marked her as the next sacrifice. Watching from afar, Demonio stood there with his arms crossed, tracking every step they took. As they kept moving, Rebecca's fury erupted. She snapped that Tiara was an unbearable mother for bulldozing her daughter's feelings and dragging her away by force. And yeah, that's exactly how the story had it. Even in the game, Tiara was framed as a truly awful mom at this point. That Rest Village scene hammered the truth home. Tiara was so obsessed with her own customs that she put them above her daughter. And Tina had to obey every order with zero pushback. But don't be fooled, there's a real story hiding under all that noise. Tina stood there with a crushed look on her face, and with one gentle hand resting on her head, it was clear. Anyone who pushed through to the end of this chapter would finally uncover the truth behind what just happened. She dozed in her mom's arms, blissfully unaware trouble was racing toward them. Lady Tiara stared out of the carriage window, steel in her eyes for everyone who'd misread her every move. The truth and the massive, boundless love she carried for her daughter wasn't far off. At the center of everything towers the world tree, breathing life into the world and feeding it with magic, raining blessings on the land, but mess with it, and it will unleash disaster beyond imagination. On the western Mundo continent, in a human village perched near the elven lands, peace gets ripped apart when a monstrous dark-feathered bird dives from the sky and screams, its talons tearing through the street. A woman grabs her young son and bolts for safety, but she trips, hits the ground, and goes down hard. The creature barrels toward them, and the injured mother yanks her son away, screaming for him to run just to save himself. Tears flooded his face as the boy shouted in raw defiance, begging the beast to spare his mother. Then the monster shrieked and lunged, its razor-sharp beak aimed straight at the fallen woman. A split-second flash of black slices through the air. Then a swordsman in a dark coat drops right between the monster and its prey, carving a perfect arc that drops the beast in one clean strike, and the boy and his mother can only gawk, frozen in total shock. This all went down on the Mundo continent. Our swordsmen were traveling with their academies okay, racing toward the elf settlement called Rest Village. He wipes out every monster in the area, and then he tells the villagers they're finally safe for now. An elder can't stop thanking him, but the swordsman stays cool and steady, no repayment needed. This was just another lesson in his training. The villagers whisper in shock, stunned that a noble, especially the young master of the traitorous Tridor family, would be so genuinely kind. Then the boy he saved steps forward, his mother right behind him, and offers heartfelt thanks. The swordsman gently pats the boy's head, a calm little smile curling up on his face, and tells him that in that brave moment of defiance, yeah, he looked seriously cool. Then he drops a hard-earned lesson on the boy. If you want to be a real man, you've got to get strong enough to protect your mother, and the boy nods, fully buying into Ernest's belief. He stands back as the villagers he rescued erupt into cheers and waves, while his tiny floating companion watches with a smug grin like, look at him, official hero status. Elsewhere, Sakura lets out a breath of pure relief. Somehow they saved the village. And the terrifying part, in the original story it got wiped out by rampaging beasts in a single line, a fate they just slammed the door on. The moment rampaging beasts come to mind, dread creases the swordsman's face. He knows it isn't random, it's the world tree throwing the world into chaos, and the elves refuse to let that disaster hit the continent, so every few centuries they carry out a terrifying tradition. They sacrifice a village maid. Now this ancient duty has landed on a fresh generation. 800 years ago, the maiden was Mama Tierra, and today it's her daughter, Tina, who's been marked to carry that same crushing role, the weight etched all over her grim, somber face. That's how he ends up in an office, face-to-face with Granny Sagero, who breaks down the political mess. How the Academy spotted something off in the elf village, but since it's an autonomous district, they were barred from moving against it directly. She keeps insisting the village might technically belong to the nation, but it runs like its own little country. And that's why they need a real, solid reason before they can even send the official night order or the investigation hits a wall. This situation is razor-thin. She warns that one reckless move could spiral into an international incident, so even though Tina's just a first year, they had to quietly hand her over, no noise at all. But she dishes out a loophole. The academy's handcuffed by politics, yet the students still get some freedom. So if they volunteer on their own, the academy can't stop it, and the whole thing can be spun as just extracurricular study. He catches her meaning instantly, then his mind snaps back to his comrades. Ray and Rebecca must have just shown up too, chasing the same mission to save Tina. Once his job's done, he pivots and strides straight for the door. As he walks out, he tells her he'll hand the girl over to them. Sagero watches him disappear and thinks, so our goal is the same, even if the way he goes about it looks different. The masked swordsman looms at the edge of a thick, twisting forest, while his little round buddy hovers at his side. Then the creature asks if the elven village waits deeper in the woods. He snaps around with grim determination and tells them it's none of that for him. He's got a woman he has to rescue. His thoughts lock onto the real goal. If the story plays out the same way, the one doomed for sacrifice in this arc won't be Tina. It'll be her mother, Tierra, because right now she's trapped and helpless inside the forest. Outside a huge tent planted in the clearing, Demonio powers up a comm device, ready to do a quick, routine check-in with Gloria. Catches land out of nowhere. Gloria lets out a sharp yelp mid-change, and the shock hits Demonio so hard he's left completely stunned. Coil snaps into panic, clamps his hands over his eyes, and blurts out an apology. He swears he only thought it could be urgent. Meanwhile, his little round companion hovers nearby, squinting like, so you really didn't do it on purpose. What? He's only half undressed, and Gloria just nods along like his explanation makes sense, even though her mind's already sprinting toward the next crisis. Then she shoots back, asking if that nearby beast is taken care of. He lets out a chuckle, steadies himself, and his companion bursts in with praise, saying his skill never fails to blow people away. Fully dressed at last, Gloria rushes in to apologize. She never should have left Tina's situation entirely to the student, but then she throws him a quick reassurance. He has nothing to worry about. Demonio stares at her with real awe, and you can practically see the moment he finally gets just how deeply she cares about her students. Later, while they trek through the woods, he tells them Ray and the others reached Rest Village the day before, and the welcome was surprisingly warm, but now there's been zero news since. His companion drifts up beside him and fires off a sharp question. If they're all headed to the same place, why didn't they just travel together from the start? He tells them that in the original story, the protagonist's party is supposed to get a warm welcome the second they arrive. Then his companion presses him, and he finally admits that his hatred for Ray Brave is a big reason too. From his spot at a distance, the hero watched as his party rolled right into the elf village, and Tina's classmates got greeted with open arms. Then the elves swept them into a massive banquet feast. That hospitality was a total act. This whole celebration was a trap, and 1 second later, Ray Brave got yanked into thick, suffocating vines. He wasn't alone at all. Sakura and Monica were tied up tight too, and Tino leaned in, cackling like it was the funniest thing in the world as she spilled the trap. She de-drugged their food with sleeping powder, snatched away their weapons and communicators, and even the vines were siphoning their magic until their power died out and they couldn't fight back. In the middle of all that despair, Ray felt one of his own bonds snap, and he knew Tina did it on purpose. Then he dug into his pocket and found a prison key waiting there, locking in the truth. This whole thing was a trap built for a solo escape, straight out of a role-playing game. This whole situation screams the same nasty game trick every time. The game rips you away from your party, wipes your gear clean, and throws you into a brutal stealth escape from the guards. Huddled in the woods, the masked swordsman watched, teeth clenched as irritation surged, grimacing because the protagonist's crew had been yanked into another mess, and he wanted no part of it. While everyone else tore through the village creating chaos, he used that noise-like cover, slipping in quietly, eyes locked on his own mission. Ray's stealthy push got cut off in an instant. Right as he slipped free, he burst from the trees, skidded to a stop, and blurted, "Demanio." With shock on his face, totally stunned to see him here, even though he did remember Demanio promised everything he could would arrive later. He looked totally flustered, fumbling for words as he stammered through it. After the elves captured him, he watched everything unravel, and somehow, he was the only one who managed to break free. Ray finally swallowed his pride and admitted he'd messed up big because the guards had spotted him. The masked swordsman's face snapped into pure rage, and the hero who couldn't handle the minigame sealed it all, kicking off the insanely painful chain of trouble Ray knew was coming. Then Ray saw it. He was already being chased, and the swordsman, burning with frustration, sat there seething. Out of nowhere, a stern-faced elf dropped in gracefully right in front of him and his unwanted companion, and the newcomer's hard-eyed stare pinned them in place like a locked door. Elf spotted Ray Brave and immediately clocked him as the guy who'd been with Tina, while Demonio's irritation burned inside him. He stayed silent, seething at the thought that these people could ever be his comrades. He demanded to know what ritual the elf was talking about, and the elf guard just stood there cool as ice, telling him to drop the fight. Let himself be locked up, because once the ceremony ended, they'd let him go. His eyes snapped wide as the pieces clicked, so the ritual wasn't random at all, it was tied to Tina's fate, and suddenly the plan felt like it might be trapping her inside the world tree. When he heard the truth, his fist slammed shut in defiance, and he swore, no doubts, no fear, that he'd stop that ritual come what may. The elf guard sat high on a twisted branch as thorny vines squirmed around him, staring down at the human with pure contempt. Then snarled a warning, "Don't meddle in his village's customs because you don't know a thing." Realizing he couldn't keep dodging capture in this strange land, he spun around to the only person who might save him, Demonio, calling out to him, because at this point it was either that or nothing. He blurted out his desperate plea, begging Demonio to fight at his side. Then the whole place went silent like the world froze. Demonio's masked swordsman and his little companion just stared back, faces screaming pure panic and shock. In a sunlit spring hidden inside a whispering forest, a young elf maiden stands waist-deep in crystal-clear water, readying herself for a sacred rite. A sacred tradition passed down for ages. Before a maiden can dedicate herself to the world tree, she has to cleanse her body right here in this spring. Eyes shut tight as she steps into the weight of the moment. Water ripples again as another figure steps in, Tiara. And when she speaks up, the truth hits hard. This ritual drags old memories back to life because she did the exact same thing 800 years ago. She leans in and reassures Tina, telling the young maiden to breathe easy. Before the ritual, preparations pile up, but she promises she'll stay right beside her for every single step. With a gentle smile, Tiara scoots closer and whispers, "Tina, are you scared?" Tina snaps her gaze away, steals her face, and tells them she's fine, because she knows this duty matters, and if she stumbles, everyone pays the price. The whole area seems to fall silent as her words land, while one lone leaf drifts across the water, and Tina pauses, because something heavy is still gnawing at her thoughts. Her resolve wavers the moment she spins back, eyes blazing wide with worry, and she blurts out who's even okay at the academy. Yet the ear just tells her flat out that she already knows. While Tiara calmly tells Tina, "Don't worry, I'll handle everything," the story snaps elsewhere. An elf warrior summons the forest's power and bellows that the ignorant fools will be judged by its wrath. Command blasts forth a storm of razor roots and snapping vines that burst from the ground, wrapping those masked swordsmen up tight, and Ray can't breathe. He's staring in pure shock because the forest feels alive like it's got a pulse. The masked swordsmen catch on fast. Elra's warriors can command the trees, and with the World Tree's blessing, their power surges even stronger. Two swordsmen, plus his companion, got cornered, staring down an enemy supercharged by his domain, and it's a known truth. Elves hit peak power in their own forest, which is why their village has kept its independence for so long with defenses built like a fortress. As the roots and branches slammed toward him, Ray Brave's stomach dropped, panic exploding, because he finally understood he had no defense and the elves still had his sword. Realizing he was trapped, the masked swordsman snapped into action, flinging a spare blade at him and pushing him to grab it right now. He snatched the weapon out of the air, and right then the swordsman snapped, "Don't worry about bringing it back," his own face clenched in razor-focused concentration. Now fully armed, the two huddled back to back, blades screaming as they carved a path through the storm of sharpened roots and branches. Their synchronized defense made the elf warrior's eyes narrow, and he grudgingly gave them credit, then smirked with total confidence and dared them to survive his next move. The ground buckled as if the forest itself exploded, and out of it rose raw, lifelike, unclothed women forged from the wood's own essence, while his comrades and classmates stared on in shock. The elf warrior smirked and taunted Ray, asking what it felt like to watch his precious friends laid bare, then bragged that he'd called on the forest's memories to rebuild their likenesses, leaving Ray stunned, face burning red as he blurted out, choking on disbelief. He flinched as the wooden effigies of his friends started closing in, and he snapped that this was a coward's trick, only for the elf to laugh from a distance, saying that even knowing they were fake didn't make them any easier to smash, and clearly watching the fear hit him hard. While Ray was busy, the elf warrior snapped his focus onto the masked swordsman, noting the insane mana cost of carving the trees that precisely. But he smiled anyway, because with Ray distracted, the pathetic man in black was about to get dropped fast. He swore his plan was airtight, convinced every man was a fool ready to fall for any show like that. He leaned in, waiting to catch the swordsman, just another smooth talker walking straight into the trap. But under the mask, his hand tightened with a snap, fingers curling like razor claws charging toward the attack. His assumption got obliterated in a heartbeat. Like a phantom, the masked swordsman streaked forward, his blade whipping through the replicas in a single blur, no hesitation at all, while the elf warrior froze and blurted that it was absolutely ridiculous. While the swordsman kept going, stone-cold and focused, Ray Brave stood off to the side with his jaw dropped, utterly stunned, and all he could manage was one whisper, "Beautiful." I couldn't believe the swordsmanship I was seeing. The masked fighter moved with razor-precise control, free of any dark intent, pure skill made flesh. With half-lidded vacant eyes, he calmly swept across the battlefield, pure focus, unwavering like a tranquil ocean where even his heartbeat refused to stir. His observer couldn't miss it. Ray snapped to the truth as the swordsman stood there, owning that moment with pure, ultimate swordsmanship. As the final replicas crumpled and fizzed into dead vines on the ground, a crushing weight slammed into Ray Clutch's chest. He couldn't stop repeating, "Demaniacan is unreal." He spun to Tina, admitting that all these bizarre sights were about to make him heave. While the elf warrior in the distance tracked his plan and its wreckage, teeth clenched as he muttered that this wasn't how it was meant to play out. And the masked swordsman just watched, calm as Ray finally reached his limit. Frustration exploded into full-blown rage. An elf snapped a glare at the swordsman, clocked him as Demanio Tridor, and demanded to know why someone with that kind of power had pretended to be so timid and weak. The masked swordsman just raked a hand through his hair, smirking like he already knew the truth. Then he acted clueless, coolly asking what in the world the elf could possibly mean. He can't believe it. One second the elf warrior is standing, the next he drops to his knees, shaking all over, and with a strained voice he finally admits defeat. The sudden surrender floors the swordsmen, leaving them staring in shock, trying to figure out what the hell is really happening, while his little companion hovers nearby just as stunned. Once the danger is dealt with, Ray Brave shoves the moment forward and urges his crew to head back to the village. But the bound elf guard snaps back, demanding to know if they really plan to abandon the sacred ritual. Ray shoots him an apology on the spot and promises, "I'll return later and help you finish this." His voice crackles with urgency as he breaks the bad news. World Tree is trembling on the edge of disaster. And he doesn't mince words. If they don't offer up an elf priestess as a sacrifice right now, a catastrophe will slam into the whole continent. It goes on to warn that all this fresh bloodshed from the nearby beasts is just a warm-up for the disaster about to hit. Then Ray Brave snaps his gaze back, and confusion flashes across his face. Self's warning turns the future into a nightmare. When the World Tree, the very heartbeat of life, starts failing, everything across the continent collapses. Manate dwindles, disasters tear the sky open, famine grips the streets, and beasts go berserk in endless waves. Every horror you can imagine will come crashing down. They lay out their ancient duty. For thousands of years, the elves have lived beside the World Tree, sending a maiden at fixed intervals to slam the brakes on those disasters before they hit. His voice spikes with raw desperation. He's yelling that humankind's peace has always been built on elf sacrifices. Then he demands to know if they realize it was his people who kept the world from falling apart. Brave snaps around and locks onto him, face set in seriousness. He fires a question at the elf. Would he really throw Tina away for the world? The elf hasn't even breathed out an answer when the masked swordsman cuts in, voice cool as he says, straight up, that the situation has changed. He breaks it all down. The world tree's condition has cratered in just a few months, so fast it's never happened before. Normally, the cycle would have kept it stable for another 50 years. And then he drops the key truth. When the sacrifice happens, it doesn't die. It just falls into a 100-year sleep. Ray clenched his fist and bowed his head, lost in thought. Because even if 100 years feels like a blink to elves, it's an entire lifetime for humans, and that means they'd never, ever see Tina again. His head jerks up, rage twisting his face, and he rips into the room. Saying a world that asks for one girl's sacrifice just to spare everyone else is flat out wrong at the very core. His face was locked on pure determination, yet the masked swordsman saw every lie in it. So you're the protagonist, he scoffed, and you're totally clueless, no plan at all. Stuck on his next move, he spun toward the masked swordsman for answers, and the masked man snapped that he needed to break his comrades out first. Then the masked swordsman quietly weighed the old, brutal choice. Save the world or risk it all for one girl, while watching the protagonist flail with no real plan, just loud, empty idealism. As Ray tried to process what he'd just seen, the masked swordsman snapped a chilling glare onto a captive elf guard, and he promised to wring out every last drop of information, shocking the prisoner to his core. He flashed a wicked grin at Ray and told him to sit back and watch from the sidelines. Then the masked swordsman threw his hands up and declared, "All right, I'm starting." The elf warrior refused to be shaken. He bared his teeth, roared back in defiance, declared his pride to the world, and swore he'd never break under torture. Still unmoved by the outburst, the masked swordsman calmly confirmed the elf's name was Sharon. Then, right as the words left his mouth, the rope snapped tight, biting into the warrior's flesh. Sharon gasped through the pain as the masked swordsman cut in with his terms. "Cooperate and we'll save Lady Tiara." Then he dropped the bombshell that Tina was lining up to take her mother's place in the sacrificial ritual. The elf gaped in total disbelief, demanding how in the world he could know that buried secret. Because, yeah, this was exactly Lady Tiara's real hidden plan. In the world's original timeline, the one sealed away wasn't the daughter, it was her mother. Lady Tiara decided to sacrifice herself from the very start, and every move she made to drag her daughter home from the academy was a perfectly staged act. The whole elaborate setup was just one thing: finding out whether her daughter, Tina, had actually made real friends at the academy, because real friends would stand by her. Now the truth hit. Lady Tiara was ready to throw herself into the fire to save both the continent and her daughter's youth, powered by a love so deep it felt older than the earth itself. That gut-punch revelation lit Ray Brave's temper on fire. He raged that Tina would never be sacrificed, remembering how the story's hero had fought back with everything they had, until one detail finally snapped into place. It was Tina who was meant to be offered, it was her mother, and that's when his fury cooled. Tina clung to him and softly urged them to honor her mother's wishes. While Ray reeled from the news, Sharon snapped her focus to the masked swordsman, demanding his name, and how he even knew a secret only the top brass ever talked about. The masked man seethed inside, sick of the way the protagonist only got sympathetic when the mother was the one in danger. No more waiting, he knew they had to trade information right now. The masked swordsman and Tina pushed into the forest with one fierce purpose, fully aware the road ahead was brutal. But he swore he'd throw every tool he had at the problem to save Lady Tiara. Their path shoved them deeper into the woods, and the world tree's condition was straight up wrong even for the elves. If things were going to match the original story, it wasn't some slow fade. It was a sudden, savage drop that ripped it out of its natural cycle. They never even saw it coming. Others were getting yanked in by the same power, too. A slender, covered-faced stranger swayed in ecstasy, starving for more of that brutal energy, while his muscular partner nodded along, feeling the world tree's magic soak straight into his bones and praising how pure and supreme it was. The slender man's wild revelry got yanked to a stop when a dark-cloaked figure in an ornate helmet showed up. This commander snapped him back to reality, warning him not to overdo it, and to keep the mission the primordial mother gave them front and center. The slender man gave a carefree nod, brushing it off like sure he could keep the fun going a little. Because hey, the primordial mother was so kind. Their conversation tore through the ancient trees, and a chilling philosophy bled into the air. They're convinced their mama forgives everything, no matter who they kill, what they smash, or how selfish and clueless they act. The four stood shoulder to shoulder, a tight pack of zealots, chomping at the bit to unleash their destructive mission. After Sharon, the elf guard, left his side, Ray sprinted through the forest, his tiny companions barely managing to keep up. Before long, he burst into the elf village and found the game's hero, Ray Brave, waiting right there. He shot out an apology for the delay, then admitted the monsters out in the woods had slammed him with a detour. He snapped his eyes up from the crate, shocked, because Ray was still there, while Sharon faded into the background as she walked away. Then he shifts his focus to the recovered supplies, two giant wooden crates packed to the brim with their stolen weapons and gear. A spear clattered out of the crate, and Ray's confidence flared as he shouted that these were the exact items ripped from their supply box. Because now they had their gear back, they were ready to fight again, and their sights were set on the dungeon. His confident declaration died in his throat. Then he crumpled to his knees as a woman's high-heeled shoe slid into view, and a teasing voice asked what they thought they were doing. Lady Tiara, Tina's mother, always had that spot glass of wine in hand as she looked down at them and grinned, calling them her naughty little babies. Then letting out that warm laugh about how this was such a happy day, so they should all drink and cut loose. Ray beside Ray instantly clocked who she was. Her playful smile hid a deadly mission. Just days before, she got down on her knees to tell Tina the ritual would start any moment, and that stopping it was already out of the question. Back in the present, she grabbed Ray's hand and talked to him like he was a kid. Be good, stay quiet until it's done. Ray snapped back, swearing they'd come here to talk. She spun away from him, shutting down his plea without a second thought, and with a gentle hum she teased, sounds like someone's cranky, maybe they're just sleepy. With a smile that disarmed everyone, she marched right back up to them and offered to put them to sleep, then casually mentioned she had their favorite milkies. And just like that, she was cradling Ray like a baby, so Tina yelped his name, while a flustered Ray snapped at her to knock it off, insisting this was no joke. They had a serious situation to deal with. Ray's eyes go wide with disbelief. He can't even process what's happening. Cradled in Lady Tiara's arms, Ray's body has somehow transformed into a baby, and Tiara instantly misreads it, convinced the clever demonio must be plotting something. Decides to follow suit. Transforming into a baby of his own, bib and all, Ray drops to the floor and crawls after her, dead set on joining the chaos. Ray's attack gets cut short as he lunges forward and slams a shocking hard headbutt. Then the impact whips him backward, stunned. Ray's hit makes his real plan crystal clear. He'll be the lone distraction so the others can make it out. And while he keeps that mask on, rage burns inside him as he quietly tears into himself for that pathetic, half-hearted stunt, and for even daring to set one finger on Lady Tiara. The gamble pays off. Ray snaps back into his normal form and rockets out of the room, sprinting hard. Lady Tiara just watches him go, calling him magnificent, and then she turns to Ray to thank him for his help. With Regon beside her, Lady Tiara's eyes snap back to the baby in her arms, Dimash-chan, and she gushes, telling him to stay close so he can nurse and get drowsy with her. Nearby, Tina straightens her outfit, wearing resignation-like armor. The ritual is almost here and she just accepts it, because this is the way it has to be. She clamps down on her feelings, convinced that if she swallows every last burden alone, nothing will go wrong, so she keeps drilling into herself that she can't afford fear. As Tina resigns herself to what's coming, Ray, still cradled in someone's arms, feels Lady Tiara's whole vibe quietly change. He tilts his head up at her, his baby-faced look totally clashing with the intensity blazing in his eyes. Then he tells her straight up that she's lost her focus, and he can literally see the hesitation creeping in. His stare cuts like a blade, steady, unblinking. He admits he's sorry, but his heart isn't built for that kind of softness, and he sure as hell isn't the type to cling to a mommy. He kept hammering his point, and his thoughts thudded through Lady Tiara's mind, how a real mother craves nothing but her child's joy, pouring out everything and asking for nothing back. Then he saw it. A mother who never complains, who smiles even when the weight of her burdens crushes her dry. And the moment he clocked that, affection hit him like a storm. He just wanted to spoil her rotten. But then he snapped the truth into place. Being a mom doesn't automatically make you someone's comfort, and thinking that way is shallow, plain dumb. Lady Tiara's perfect composure finally started to splinter under the pressure of his gaze. In a jolt nobody could explain, everything flipped. Ray snapped back to his real form and cradled a tiny, bewildered Lady Tiara in his arms. While Tina and Ray just froze in terror, Tina sobbing and shouting for someone to swear this couldn't be real. Real Ray cradles the startled, baby-like elf in his arms and tries to calm her down, whispering that she's adorable and telling her to settle. But she can only stare, stunned, wondering what on earth is happening to her. With a wry grin still on his face, he shrugs and says even mothers sometimes want to be babies too, like it's totally normal, no big deal at all. And right there, Rebecca can only stare as the whole thing plays out, totally lost, her brain screaming that reality can't possibly work this way. Attention snaps to Ray Brave, standing atop a nearby staircase. He grins and tells everyone, "My plan's on track," while the other academy students are down in the chaos, frantic as they try to save the infant's daughter. She rips the truth into the de-aged elf's eyes, then the kicker hits. Behind the scenes, she's already getting ready to step into her daughter's role. A flashback crashes in her adult self, scrubbing her body in a spring and sipping sacred wine to finish the full shrine maiden ritual. And on her baby-faced innocence, that terrifying realization finally dawns. He stared down at her, his face tightening, and told her he'd heard about her plan from Sharon, then smirked and called her a naughty child for hiding everything. Sitting beside her, he drives the point home. He's sure she got it, that in her mind sacrificing herself and her daughter is the only shot to save the world, and he can't shake the worry that she'll just let fate play out with no fight. His words hit like a sledgehammer and the tiny elf trembles. Her tough mask cracks as she stammers, trying to say something, but all she can get out is, if only I. Her eyes blow wide in terror, panic flooding her whole face as sweat pours down because the truth hits, and suddenly she's left staring at the question, why is any of this happening? Ray's stare stays locked on hers, sharp as a blade. He tells her it's completely normal to be terrified because she's still just a baby. Right here, there's no way to mask that panic with pride or shove it aside behind duty. Then she finally spills the truth behind her plan. That seal only clings for 100 years to young elf maidens, and at her age there's basically no way to last until it breaks. Her life force would gut her out and she'd die. He says she already knew that, already decided to die for her daughter. And when the DAH Tiara hears it, she's forced to admit he's right. She has nothing left to fear anymore, not even death. A tremor ripped through her as tears spilled from those infant eyes. Because after a full 1,000 years of living, the brutal terror of dying still clenched her, a truth so real it hit like a punch. Cradling her tiny body, Ray couldn't help but admit he'd stalled, wondering if she truly wanted to die or if his meddling was just selfish fear. But the moment he saw her like this, he knew he was right to come. All his doubt burned away as he stared into the wide-eyed infant elf. And then he swore with iron certainty that he'd save her no matter the cost. Right as everything peaked, the piece exploded. 2 elf guards charged into the hallway and locked onto him instantly. Found you, one barked, demanding what he was doing here. He snapped off a swift kick and the guards went flying, sprawling in a heap, no time to argue. As he bolted, he tossed a grin over his shoulder and shouted, "We'll meet again, Tiara Mama." Then he was gone and a blinding flash ripped through the room. Tiara reappeared in her adult form in an instant, completely stunned, like she had no idea what just happened. The guards shot up in a panic. One yanked himself to his feet and yelled at the others to chase the intruder, while the first guard wiped a tear aside, frantic with worry, asking if she was okay and totally unharmed. She told him she was okay, but her mind kept spiraling back to Ray's promise to save her, his words clawing at her thoughts. A deep blush erupted across her cheeks, and her flustered mind scrambled. She muttered to herself that nothing happened, hand pressed to her lip like it could stop the wave of emotion from spilling out. The elf village's ancient traditions finally hit their breaking point. Under a towering, age-old tree, every heartbeat and every emotion collides at once. 2 rival factions face off, on one side, the ones determined to unleash the sacred ritual, and on the other, the ones willing to smash everything to stop it. Inside a stone chamber, Ray and his companions rush in, ready to intervene, while deep in the sanctuary, the elven maiden and her attendants step forward and begin the ceremony. At the forest's edge, he and his crew brace as every faction barrels in, and right in front of them, Lady Tiara starts the ritual. Because behind the scenes, someone's plotting hard, and another rival is hell-bent on stealing her daughter's place. And then there's another player in the mix, someone who walks a road that was never even written into the original story. At Noblesse Magic Academy, a wild new record is getting shattered, and I'm here to chronicle every single moment as it happens. Inside the academy walls, Headmistress Sagaro and Gloria get a message, and Sagaro immediately nods, saying the plea alone is reason enough to blow reinforcements in fast. On the other side of that magical link, the elf guard, Lady Sharon, sends her thanks, and she admits this whole situation completely blindsided her. Sagaro can't stop himself from grinning. After all that talk about hating interference, he never imagined she'd walk right into this with zero hesitation, and the moment hits him hard. Back in the forest near the elf village, Sharon had blown up, snapping that she'd never rely on humans and demanding whether Demonio had lost his mind for even suggesting they ask the academy for help. His pride detonated, and Demonio answered with pure desperation, bowing low while his voice cracked as he pleaded for help. Then he tilted his head to answer Sharon's stunned question. Why would he go to such extremes for Lady Tiara? He didn't need a reason, he said. He was saving a noble, kind mother. Watching that man dig in and then finally break, Sharon realized her own stubborn pride was pointless, and that tiny comms device sitting right in front of him was the proof of his change of heart. Back in the present, Sagaro's smirk blooms the moment Gloria walks out, and she sinks into a long, deep pull from her pipe, eyes sharp, thinking about just how insanely fascinating Demanio Tridor really is. In the office, Gloria slams a book shut with a sharp snap and hands it to her boss. Easy to read, no doubt about it. How to Teach Your Students Without Violets. She freezes for a beat, then spins around and tells him exactly what it's for. Her stay nonviolent lesson explodes in her face right away. Maniana whips around with a smug little grin, slides her glasses off, and with this wicked excitement she blurts, "So, does that mean I can smack them?" In a forest glowing like magic, the world tree rises in silence. And to keep it calm, a sacred ritual has to happen, one that demands the priestess be sealed away. As the ritual rolls on, a solemn line of elven women creeps through the woods, every twist of fate snapping into place exactly as the prophecy said. Shadows shifted as another figure kept watch, the heretic demonio crouched behind a tree, eyes locked on the ceremony, biding his time until the perfect moment to strike. Ray isn't the only one itching to interfere. When the ritual hits its final phase, Ray and his friends burst onto the scene, dead set on stopping it. Lady Tiara stands before her daughter, Tina, and when the young elf spins around, despair crashes over her face as she sees her friends. Her composure snaps in an instant. Tina gasps and cries that she can't do this. She won't be torn away from everyone because she still wants to go to the academy. Her emotional plea finally lands. Lady Tiara calmly leans in and gently lifts the ornate ceremonial hairpiece off her daughter's head. Then she carefully lifts that delicate circlet and settles it into her own hair, smiling softly, like she'd been saving it for this moment. And she tells Tina she'd been waiting to hear those exact words. Ray Brave gets hit with a sudden realization. Everything clicks, and he demands to know if she planned this all along to take her daughter's place, while Lady Tiara leans in and confirms that the elven leaders already knew the moment the change was made. Tina sobs out her mother's name, but Sharon jams her back from the crowd, another guard stepping in, then tells her this is the choice Lady Tiara made for herself. Tina's face went ghost pale as the elf guard spilled the truth. Her mother's plan was already set. He said Lady Tiara would step forward to take the crisis head-on, handing the elves' future to her daughter, and he made it clear. They weren't allowed to get in the way of that noble choice. As she trembles, Ray steels himself and gently grips her shoulders, his face heavy with sorrow. He tells her to obey her mother's wishes, but Tina can only stare up at him, her voice barely more than a whisper as she says his name. While Lady Tiara climbs the last steps, her thoughts slip backward in time and a rush of nostalgia hits her hard, because she's remembering a moment just like this from long ago. 800 years back when her heart beat only for a human man, he'd stumbled into her village by pure chance, and she loved him like it was the only life she had. But now as she digs through those memories, a cruel truth hits hard. The centuries have blurred his face and she can't see it anymore. She reels from the brutal end of their love, a bond forged between a human and an elf, only for her people's cursed traditions to tear it apart for good. Back in the present, she stands right at the edge of her fate, steps into a century-long slumber, sealing peace across the continent, because that's the sacred duty of a priestess. Yet his final words still slice through her every thought. He'd screamed those promises to her, swearing he'd always wait, stay alive for 100 years, and keep loving her long after he'd grown old. His desperate vow lit a spark in her, and even knowing it was a promise that could never come true, she still let herself believe, just for a moment, that a miracle might break through. As the ritual kicks off, the world tree's roots whip out dark, choking tendrils and clamp down on her body. She realizes the cold truth instantly. That century-long sleep was never sleep at all, not even close. While she's sealed, her mind stays wired straight into the world tree, draining her mana and smarts without end, so she can feel everything. But she's trapped in a pitch-dark, silent void, totally frozen and unable to move. She just waited, counting the hours in that cruel quiet, desperate to believe that, someday in all that emptiness, she'd finally be reunited with him. 100 years of desperate prayers for one miracle kept her alive, until her feet finally kissed the grass again. No miracle arrived, just her, standing alone in front of a battered gravestone, the whole sky hanging gray over everything. She heard the truth. For a human, he'd lived a remarkably long life, so long that the stone inscription didn't just hint at it, it proved it. He died of old age 15 years before her seal ever got lifted. Her eyes popped wide the moment she learned that when he died, he was surrounded by his children and grandchildren. Just a year after she was sealed away, he went and married someone else, and life rewarded him with wonderful children and a picture-perfect family. He ended up living a bright, joyful life, surrounded by a whole crowd of grandchildren, and through it all, he never once uttered her name, not even in his final moments. The full, horrifying truth hit her like a wrecking ball. While she was laying down her life to save the world, he was out there living it up with another woman. Once it finally sank in, it felt like her whole world went pointless. She slumped in the chair with a glass in her hand, wine dripping in an empty one while the bottle still sat full. She took a slow sip, and bitterness hit like a punchline. She'd only been herself to blame for dreaming this would ever turn out as a human could. She sprawled there with a wine glass barely clutched in her hand, cheeks burning with sorrow and booze, and a sharp, bitter thought stabbed her. If he was really going to pick someone else, he could have at least waited 10 more years. The truth crushed her, hoping like that was pathetic, and it only made her hate herself even more. Lady Tiara remembers when her love for humanity got stained dark bit by bit, until hatred took over and all she could see were their ugly truths. The forests they ruined, the wars that never ended, and the nasty desires they couldn't hide. She remembers a human who swore he'd never forget the debt. An elf once saved his life. But the world shifted, and 50 long years crawled by while people argued it was unfair to demand kids honor promises their parents made. The man was gone for good, so with a soft sigh she chose to let it all go. With that calm smile she finally cracked it. Humans weren't so different from babies at all, so stop panicking over every tiny move they made. And just like that she washed her hands of them completely. From that moment on, her days felt painfully dull. So she told the other elves straight to their faces that she was just doing the same old duties handed down for generations, with nothing of herself left in it. Even in her most private moments, duty ruled her life. She didn't love her partner at all. She just kept having children because she felt like that was what an elder was supposed to do. Even with the messy circumstances of her child's conception, the second she cradled her newborn daughter, everything snapped into place. Love flooded her heart completely. This deep love flipped her whole worldview upside down. She looked at her daughter Tina and admitted the truth. She couldn't face humans anymore. Still, her heart wouldn't quit. She was sure Tina could pull off what she couldn't. She decides it's time Tina gets something she never did, real days spent with people who feel like family, the way her friends can make it happen. Because one flash of her past slams into her mind. A human lover, a love that burned bright, then vanished too soon, leaving her to grieve alone beside his grave. She strides down the staircase, conviction burning in her chest. Tina's time with humans will forge a brand new future, not just for elves but for humanity too. Seeing Rei and Sakura clasp hands, a tiny wave of doubt hits her for a split second, but she snaps back fast. For the sake of that future, she'll swallow every human ridiculous tradition forever, no matter what it takes. Resolve hardens in her like steel. She flat out declares she's not budging for a second. Out of nowhere, thick vine-like tendrils burst up from the ground and clamp onto her, yanking her tight. She can only choke out a gasp, totally lost. As the tendrils clamp down, dread crashes over her. This presence feels nothing like the one she faced 800 years ago. Then a cruel laugh rolls through the air, and her stomach drops as she realizes something is horribly wrong. The laughter gives him away. This slender guy is just perched casually on one of the tendrils. Bound and unable to move, Tiara snaps back, demanding to know who he is. He just chuckles, saying he never thought things would go this smoothly, and he can't stop finding the whole situation hilarious. He starts needling her, sneering that elves are a stuck-in-the-mud, island-minded race that always tries to handle everything alone, and then he grins and lays it out. By messing with the world tree, he knew they'd freak out and bolt straight into that ritual, because for all their long lives, it's basically the only thing they've got going for them. The figure steps forward again and a dark symbol lights up in his palm. He admits it shocked him that Tiara got picked as the sacrifice instead of her daughter, but he shrugs like it doesn't matter. He'll make it work. He sneers at her motives, blunting her motherly love into nothing. Then, while the tendrils tighten around her, he cackles, mocking the thought that a 1,000-year-old could be talking about love and still somehow getting it right. The antagonist leans in and boasts that every move is exactly according to his plan. Then he reaches for the final step, draining the world tree's mana through her as the living conduit. He glares down at the trapped elf, hammers in a final crushing line, and spits that her noble sacrifice meant absolutely nothing, just a crying shame as tears pour down his face. He leans in, malice blazing across his face, and sneers that it's a pointless self-sacrifice, then lets out a grotesque flick of his tongue and delivers his sincerest condolences like a knife. His taunts got yanked out mid-breath when a fist smashed into his face and shut him down instantly, while Lady Tyra and the masked swordsman below stared in stunned silence at the brutal, sudden rescue. That strike blasted the slender antagonist backward with a raw scream of pain, while the masked swordsman planted his feet and kept his fists locked tight. Pina could see it plain. He'd been lining up for this exact second, because the enemy always comes to hunt, and it's the missing prey you never spot that gets you. This intervention tore the story off its tragic track, because in the original version, Mama T Arizona and the life force got completely siphoned away, leaving her as an empty shell before she died. With the immediate danger finally easing, Lady Tiara whipped her gaze to her rescuer, tears spilling as recognition hit, weakly calling out, "Demo boy." He stood face to face with her towering presence, Pina at his side, and bowed in before her, apologizing for what he'd done, saying it had been a hair's breadth escape while addressing her with respect as Mama Tiara. From across the battlefield, their beaten enemies groaned, hauled themselves up, and demanded to know his name. But the duo ignored them completely, eyes fixed on the rescue standing right in front of them. Then he turned straight to Lady Tiara and said the chaos in the world tree wasn't an accident, it was the enemy's work. But it wouldn't settle until someone locked away the big mature woman, and he didn't sugarcoat it. "So Tiara, are you really going to sacrifice your own daughter to fix this?" Before Tiara could even open her mouth, the masked swordsman cut in with total certainty. He swore he wouldn't do a single thing that betrayed Mama Tiara's wishes, and then he leaned in like, "Trust me, I've got a plan." Athena clutched her resolve and swore she'd guard the mamas and the daughters they wanted to protect, while the masked swordsman snapped his dagger free, saying that loving both was the whole point of love. and that this was what true professionalism in Demania looked like. The second the elven ritual kicks in, the crowd's faces snap to confusion. People whisper, panic, and wonder if the ceremony's even finished. And one of the students knows instantly that something about it is off. From afar, Ray the masked swordsman drinks in the moment and realizes two strangers just popped up out of nowhere on the sacred platform. To the great tree, the priestess Tiara leans over with wide, startled eyes, and when she spots the dark-clad figure, she gasps his name, Demo Boy. The instant they recognized him, the swordsmen were already moving. So fast the slender villain crumpled to the ground, clutching a battered jaw, raging that the punch smashed him to pieces and demanding to know why he got hit out of nowhere. He gets zero sympathy. The swordsman snaps back that the same thing can be said about the mess the man made, and rage flashes in the slender fighter's eyes as he spits, "You damned brat, your death won't be an easy one." Still, the swordsman stays ice calm, rattling off every sin until Mama Tiara is forced into a brutal choice. He's been disrespecting her and trying to kill her. Cold fury snaps through his eyes as he rips a jagged blade free. Then he snarls a warning, making it clear death won't be the only thing the antagonist gets. As the showdown spirals, the other antagonists huddle up and talk fast, while the helmeted one snaps at Dororodio, berating him for stepping out of line. Dororodio waves it off, saying none of it matters, claiming he was the key to their plan and orders his leader to let him do exactly what he wants. The helmeted figure shrugs off his subordinate's defiance, sneering that their other ally got wiped in one hit, so pathetic it's almost laughable. And from across the way, Ray spots the whole villain crew assembled, realizing they're the heart of all evil. The plan was pure evil. When they stirred the world tree, the elves had to scramble for a ritual where a priestess merges with it, meant to safeguard the continent's mana pools. But instead it cranked the mana up exponentially. That massive power was the real prize, and the slim villain didn't just take it, he boldly lifted a dark, sigil-stamped relic and told his helmeted commander he needed no orders. Then he spelled out Ultimotor's plan. Drain every last drop of that concentrated mana until the tree stands there bone dry. The slender villain snaps at his bulky partner, brushing off any talk of rank, and insists their crew runs on equality. Because their mother is as great as anyone and wipes clean every sin. Right behind them, the world tree's massive roots start to crack, grind, and wake up. He snaps and spits that nobody gets to boss him around. Then massive roots burst from the earth as he rockets into the chaos, weaving through the whipping tendrils like a nightmare on the move, while Ray, the masked swordsman, braces for the hit. As the chaos erupts, Tiara's stomach drops. She's dead sure someone is yanking the sacred tree's branches like puppets, and it's not an elf, something she swore was impossible. Her worst fears slam home the second the slender antagonist rockets forward, lancing it with a blur of rage. Then the masked swordsman snaps into action, parrying the strike like he's been waiting for it. The attacker surges ahead, snaps an open palm toward Ray's face, and a dark, swirling sigil ripples across his skin. Ray whips away at the last second, while Tiara's breath catches in pure shock. Right then, the winged girl, Pina, swoops in beside Ray and feels the dark pressure rolling off their enemy. Before she even stops, she grabs his attention and screams, "Don't let the plants you control touch that cursed sword." Her warning locks into Ray's mind like a nightmare, because he finally clocks the guy from the original game's plot, the soul-sucking Dorodio. And when he realizes he can't just block Dorodio's hits with Pina, he knows right then this fight is going to wreck him. He remembers exactly how Dorodio's power works, how he drinks in mana, how his hands can drain both mana and life force right out of his victims, and how that brutal gift turned him into a serial killer so infamous the Neon Nation itself slapped a bounty on his head. Dororodio smirks, breaks off a chunk of that thick root like it's nothing, and needles his opponent, warning that sharp little brat not to even think about running. He flashes a smug grin inside, knowing the world tree trick was all his work, because his brutal mana absorption is draining power straight from the roots, and now he's seized control over every tree and plant around him. He casually let it slip that it just hit him. Trying to square up with the swordsman head-on would be pure foolishness. Roots burst up from the dirt like living whips, cinching tight around Mama Tiara until she screamed in agony. Then he gloated at the swordsman, sneering that the old elven hag was now his hostage. One move from him and the roots would crush her. But when he spun around, the swordsman was gone. Only a fading shadow clung to the spot he'd been standing in. Panic hit him, and he tore around, trying to figure out how his opponent vanished into thin air. A voice snapped from right behind him, calling out his slipping focus, and the swordsman shrugged, saying predicting what that slime ball would do was child's play. Just as he tried to pivot, a brutal strike smashed his cheek, and he only understood after it landed. His full focus on the hostage had handed his opponent the exact opening they'd been waiting to exploit. He stumbled back, gritting through the pain as dark energy crawled together around the swordsman's hand. Then his attacker leaned in and offered up one more clue. He shoved his glowing hand into the man's back and barked that he'd better never call Mama Tiara an old hag again. Then his powers surged, ripping into his opponent as the swordsman screamed. And with a cruel grin he taunted him, "So, how's it feel to be pierced through with love?" The masked swordsman Demanio looms over his downed opponent, while Tierra blurts that maybe they finally won, until Ray snaps back that this strike couldn't kill him. From a storm of dark energy, the slender antagonist shoots up again, and he smirks as he confirms he just swallowed an insane amount of the World Trees match. This foe is Dorodio, the Soul Eater and the final boss of this arc, and he's terrifying even before the upgrade. He already mastered forbidden spells, but now the buff and a World Tree have supercharged him, giving him brutal strength and a regeneration that won't quit. Ray remembers, in the original story, even Ray Brave couldn't so much as touch him. Dorodio only got beaten after the magic he stole from Tierra snapped out of control inside him. So when Ray hears that, he shouts for them to finish him now, before they lose their only opening. Realization hits Tierra hard, she's still trapped in Roots. If they want to enjoy this moment, they can't gamble on some last-minute weakness. They've got to take him down at full strength, no shortcuts, no mercy. Demanio hears it and instantly feels how dangerous this new situation really is. The muscular antagonist shoots Dorodio a warning, "Don't get cocky, Demonio isn't just some regular student." Dorodio clutches his chest, snarls like it hurts, and writes the opponent off as nothing but a brat. The helmeted figure stares down the swordsman, stunned by how deadly and instinctive his fighting is, like he's reading the future. Then they flat-out label him as Demonio Tridor, and even the primordial mother turns her attention to him. In a blink, he lunges forward and sweeps Tierra into his arms. She gasps in shock, but he shoots her a quick, reassuring look and tells her he's okay. Then he steels himself, orders her to grip tight, and prepares to bolt. He bolts away with her, and Dorodio explodes in fury, bellowing that the shrine hag won't slip free, then charges after them while the helmeted figure shouts a warning, "Don't chase them like this." The muscular man slams on the brakes and stops his helmeted partner, demanding they get out of Dorodio B. Because in this condition he knows he can't win, so he should be set loose instead. The helmeted figure can't believe how fast he's already marched himself right onto Manio's side. He clenches his fist and blurts that he can't stop it, he owes Demonio. Because when Demonio swallowed him, he got a slice of the World Tree's power too. He erupts in roaring laughter, the World Tree's power thunderstriking through his veins, and he vows this fresh strength will wipe them all out. Then, in the distance, a massive explosion blasts where Demonio and Tierra are standing. He clenches his fist, sparks of excitement blazing. This is the perfect moment to put his new power to the test. Then it hits him, the original plan. When the ritual finally ends, they wipe out the elves, no survivors. His eyes lock onto the two still standing, an elf warrior and a student, and he strides up fast, saying he expects them to show at least a little backbone. Ray Brave stands ready with his sword bared, shielding the shaky elf guard. Meanwhile, Demonio tears through the trees, Tierra clutched in his arms. She whips her head back and calls his name, fear and concern spilling through her voice. He strains to carry her anyway, swearing she's nowhere near heavy, and tells her the truth, gravity hits harder than he expected. Tierra frowns and makes it clear that's not what she was trying to say. As they keep sprinting for freedom, he fires off an update on their pursuers. Two of them lagged back, but now one is charging after them, and that single massive power keeps swelling like a storm about to break. She blurts that maybe it's an elf's tracking sense she's feeling, but Demanio's face hardens. He snaps that they have to run back right now. He tells her don't worry about the pursuit. Then he points the way and declares their mission is simple, save every single person in the village. He admits he'd love to handle everything alone, but the truth is he's still too green, and when it comes down to it, he's just an ordinary student. Back at the site, Dorodio seizes the moment and unleashes everything his students' privileges can give him. He grunts with raw force, hauls a huge slab of rock up from the ground, and his two companions stare in shock as they arrive. He explodes with power, rips a giant chunk of earth right off the ground, and smashes it toward the helpless duo. Then, as the massive boulder falls, he spits that only students get this kind of privilege, and the words hang there like doom about to crush them. A massive boulder slams out of the sky, a towering wall of stone meant to crush them. Down on the ground, they're frozen in terror as it swallows their view, a dark shadow locking in their doom. Right before the blow lands, steel flashes. White streaks slice through the air, and Maniana, the Witch of Thunder, shows up out of nowhere, carving the huge rock into harmless fragments with one swing, then fires off a simple reminder. It's okay to ask adults for help. Her rescue doesn't stop at defense. She whips around in one smooth motion and plants a heel right into Dorodio's jaw, jolting him backward as a sharp grunt bursts out of him. As he stumbles, the final stone fragments tumble and clatter around them, and she drops in with perfect balance, her body tight like a coiled spring, already primed to strike again. Demonio's eyes snapped wide as everything shifted in an instant. He finally understood what she meant. When it's time to depend on someone, you don't just trust them, you trust them completely. Her voice slices through his thoughts, sharp and crystal clear. She tells him to trust his senses and cling to his guardians, then drops a terrifying warning. Their enemies are already on the way. Ray tears through the forest with Tiara slumped in his arms, sprinting away from the danger snapping at their heels. As he sprints away, his little round buddy keeps hovering nearby, mind spinning like crazy. Because it suddenly remembers the master's twisted game says those two backups, a perverted older woman and a tanned older woman, aren't even supposed to be here. His expression locks in with razor-sharp determination, and he knows his tangled feelings for his mothers are quietly reshaping history right in front of everyone's eyes. Right then, on the battlefield, Maniana and Gloria crash into the scene, back to back, bracing like two unstoppable storms for the fight ahead. Monica's world freezes at the sudden sight, then she barrels forward yelling, "Mom, why are you here?" Gloria whips around with a gentle smile and says, "I couldn't stay away, not when my adorable daughter's in trouble." She tells the students they've just received an official rescue order from Sharon, one of the village's top officers, and the class vanishes through a teleportation gate straight from the academy. Because this normal procedure is wildly rare here, and Amushi can't help but point out how the whole thing reeks of an idler's mistake. As he listens to her spill everything, Ray Brave suddenly clocks what's been cooking behind the scenes, and he's sure it was Demonio who stirred the whole thing, convincing them to jump in. Once she got the full picture, Maniana stepped forward and thrust out her hand to halt them all, then snapped at everyone, including Gloria, to back off and let her handle the rest. Her eyes blaze with fierce confidence as she clenches her fist, then admits this unfamiliar job has been burning her out for weeks. So now she's ready to let loose the right way and finally blow off some steam. Across from her, the muscular villain Dora Rodeo snaps into a huge, excited grin. Then he crouches low and roars, basically bragging about how ridiculously lucky he is to face someone this promising. He stared as the two women closed in, shock snapping across his face when he spotted her, and disbelief hit hard. He never imagined the Thunder, the legendary Maniana, one of the 7 Knights of the Demon Heavenly Demon, would ever show up in a place like this. Monica hissed a warning from behind, telling Maniana to watch out. This opponent's power was terrifying. Maniana didn't flinch. She kept her gaze forward and calmly pointed out the brutal truth. She'd landed a hard kick, yet he still showed no injuries. She straight up confirmed they already knew the danger, because Demonio had fed them intel on the enemy, and then she dropped the real name, Galmo Ruber, a man hunted for murdering his own kind. A savage intelligence drop-kicked the truth into the light, his roots traced back to a southern minority tribe. In a brutal hunger for power, he chewed on forbidden spells and banned drugs, calling it a test of strength, then turned around and slaughtered people and burned their villages. Galmo scoffed at the quiet jab, fist tightening hard, and shot back that there's nothing wrong with chasing power, because nothing feels better than smashing the strong and crushing the weak under sheer force. He even spoke to Maniana like she'd get it. Like lightning in the sky, he figured a monster of her power had to know that rush that comes with violence. Maniana snapped her sword free, and the blade flared with a fierce glow. She admitted she couldn't pretend she didn't get where he was coming from, and she swore she didn't truly hate men like him. Her face twisted into a hungry grin as she wrapped up her thought, saying she didn't dislike him because he looked like the kind of guy who'd be scary good at throwing punches. Retorted with a sharp tongue of her own, and Maniana snapped her foot down hard, bracing for the impact like a fighter about to collide. The standoff detonated the moment Galmo surged forward, smashing a brutal punch into the air. Then Maniana snapped up her glowing sword and caught it with the flat, the collision blasting out a shockwave and kicking their fight into full chaos. She met his brutal strength head-on, their weapons clashing, her crackling blade scraping against his iron-hard fist, until the whole fight froze in a deadlocked storm of raw power. The blast tore through the ground with a violent shockwave, smashing her balance as her shattered sword pieces spun through the air. She touched down lightly in the distance, but the smile vanished fast. Her face tightened as she realized she was now defenseless against that terrifying enemy. Galmo Ruber jerked his head back and burst into roaring laughter, smugly claiming that the World Tree's power made him completely unstoppable. From a distance, Gloria told her students that Maniana's sword wasn't just any blade. It was a special piece built to boost her body, packed with abnormal durability and dense mana. With Galmo standing in front of her and no weapon in hand, Maniana finally sized him up as truly dangerous, because yeah, it had been way too long since she'd had to go all out. Gloria blurted out right then whether Maniana meant to tap into that power, while the students stared, totally baffled, and she went on to explain that the king hands every one of the 7 heavenly demon knights a sacred artifact. These artifacts are national treasures that have survived since ancient times, true secret weapons, and there are only 7 of them left on the whole planet. The sacred treasure Lady Maniana inherited, an estate only she could claim, was Gungnir, the divine thunder spear. A painful memory snapped into place, the younger her sobbing and swearing it wasn't her fault, because the spear she used perfectly fine just shattered, right on the very day it was handed to her. Back in the present, Gloria finally spills the real reason Maniana swings a sword, because she says it makes her look noble. Now that Gungnir's in her grip, Maniana squares up to her opponent, and the real fight is about to explode. She spilled the truth about her power. This wasn't about the spear she'd just ripped into existence, but the crackling lightning now crawling across her fists, and Galmo Ruber braced hard as he felt an unstoppable surge of pure might. With a blinding flash, she lunged in and smashed her fist into Galmo's guard. Right then, everyone snapped to attention, shocked by the truth. Her bare hands hit harder than any weapon she'd ever wielded. That punch slammed him backwards so hard his body bent in agony, like his ribs were screaming. He couldn't even process what just happened. This wasn't strategy, it was straight-up mindless brute force, raw violence so vicious even the mightiest weapon would have shattered. As he tore through the air, Maniana planted her feet, eyes locked in fierce focus. Then Gloria stepped forward, voice blazing, telling the students this was Lady Maniana's real power, and Ray Brave's eyes went wide as he murmured that it truly was the best. With his power finally unleashed, there was no way to fight back. Galmaruber crumpled to the ground, frozen in defeat, while Maniana towered over him, standing over his fallen form. The fight ended in a snap and she dropped her guard, fully relaxed, totally refreshed. With a smug wink, she told herself she only wanted jobs where one punch could end it all. Yeppy, this was the perfect showing for the one-punch mama. Staring at the wreckage, Gloria whips around to Ray and bravely starts laying out what Maniana's power really is. Then admits it's hard to explain in a straightforward way, because with one single blow, Maniana just snuffed the threat. She explains it like this. Stack multiple top-tier lightning spells into one razor-precise combo, and Maniana can streak across the battlefield at lightning speed. Then unleash attacks that hit like a full-on natural disaster. The scariest part, Maniana pulls all of this off just by gut instinct, no real grasp of the complex mechanics. Gloria treats it like a simple squeeze, boom, and then boom again. Ray Brave can't hide his amazement as Gloria lays out her massive knowledge, and she tells him straight that it's all from lived experience. Back when she was with a Night Order, she served in a unit that Maniana herself personally commanded. She calls it a demon unit. Its only command was full-on army charge, because the plan was simple, just run forward and somehow it'll all work out. Then she adds that the whole unit got disbanded almost immediately. Right then, Maniana, still kneeling, let out a painful groan, but the moment the discomfort hit, she snapped back fast, clutched a fist, flashed a fierce grin, and swore she wasn't done yet. She was ready to keep moving. As she struggles to stand, a dark power clamps onto her and yanks her mana out like lightning in a cage. Then a towering, helmeted figure steps out, calling Maniana the Thunderous Witch and making it crystal clear she's not like the others. He admits their plan blew up, but the choice to tame and brainwash her was still the right move. Monica bolts to Maniana's side, yelling her name, then the antagonist drops the bomb. A wedge is already buried in her body. A blazing, intricate mark lights up on Maniana's side as the figure smirks, saying they were one step away from finishing the brainwashing until someone crashed the plan. Elsewhere, Demanio tried to make sense of the enemy's playbook. Layered traps, a mythic-class cursed artifact meant to pin Maniana down, and curse marks they'd finish by breaking her through pleasure-based conditioning. Back at the scene, Monaco stares as the helmeted figure disappears, her face hardening as it finally clicks. I see, she murmurs, because she'd felt something was wrong and now every piece snaps into place. Maniana finally pieces it together. Those savage, explosive, wildly intense urges, the way she couldn't rein in her own libido, came straight from the curse marks that were laid on her. Maniana's fury erupts, but the helmeted villain shuts her down with a cold, flat no, claiming the curse does nothing like she says, insisting he has no clue what she's talking about, and leaving her stunned, flustered, and completely lost. He leaned in, laid it all out to the defeated Demonio. This half-finished curse mark had barely any bite. Sure, it let them shove Maniana's mana down for a little while, but right now the whole scene was pure, total chaos. Trying to fix everything from where they stood would have been a nightmare, so they slung a manio over their shoulders, then shouted they were leaving as a shimmering portal flared to life behind it. Right before they step through, they swear they'll report everything exactly as it happened to the one they call Mother. And the moment they clear the portal, a swarm of multi-headed snakes floods out, snapping and lunging like they're about to strike. When another summoned beast crashes into the scene, Rebecca gasps in pure shock. Monica snaps to Gloria, telling her to back off and let them handle the fight. Ray Bray strides forward beside Monica and Rebecca, both blades out, and he roars that they're done hiding behind protection. Now it's time to show what they can really do. He and Rebecca lunge forward together and smash into battle, leaping straight at those serpentine monsters. As the fight rages on, Gloria clocks just how rock-solid her students have become. She's sure they'll be okay. Then her focus snaps to the one problem left, Demonio, the one who slipped away with Lady Tiara. Right before the antagonist slips away, Maniana blurts out her frustration and admits she messed up. She wanted to be the one to take down Dorodo, the lone devourer and the main culprit behind the World Tree attack. The Witch of Thunder couldn't believe the report. She stood at Granny Seguero's desk with Gloria, eyes locked on Dorodio's words, stunned by the twist. The target they wanted was a white-haired kid, not the man over 90 they were supposedly hunting. From her desk, Sagero fired off the explanation. Everyone knew the old mage had gone off the deep end chasing forbidden magic, digging into ways to steal mana and break free from aging. So he was either wearing a disguise or he'd genuinely clawed his youth back. She kept her voice razor cold, laying bare what his obsession was really costing, and it all came from one simple terror: death. To finish the forbidden spell, the one people called soul devour asterisk, he had murdered hundreds, even infants. She took a drag from her pipe, then cut her assessment short. His fixation on the students wasn't just bad, it was disgusting, and it turned him into a truly dangerous, terrifying enemy. Gloria's stomach dropped at the revelation, because this guy's power felt way beyond the huge monster they'd seen before, while Maniana hurried to calm her down, telling her to trust Demanio and let him deal with it. Her friend's confidence hit the spot. Manhwa watched with a proud grin and declared, "Demania is after all my #1 disciple and my proudest student." Swallowed by sudden affection, Gloria yanked Maniana into a crushing, warm embrace, and the Witch of Thunder froze for a split second, totally thrown off. The story slides into a calm forest. Sunbeams pierce the trees and sparkle as a tiny waterfall tumbles, feeding the stream below with a gentle shimmer. Kneeling on a rock at the water's edge, Lady Tiara's peaceful breath gets ripped away, her eyes fly wide with alarm as she senses something wrong nearby. Elsewhere, the masked swordsman is trapped in a brutal fight. He whips out a jagged blade and unleashes a roaring, arching slash, and when it lands, he can't deny it. The man obsessed with Mama is terrifyingly tough. In a sun-dappled clearing, the masked swordsman digs in his heels as a brutal enemy closes in, while the elf guard is boxed in by two hulking shadow beasts, their dark energy maws snapping open as they hurl themselves straight at him. The elf guard lashes out a tangle of shadow at him, but the swordsman just keeps his cool. Then the guard sneers, swearing that attack is pure uselessness. He needles his opponent, daring him to finally unleash everything. Then the elf bows, and a crackle of dark energy surges from his hand like a warning. He's still fully charged and itching for round 2. The last swordsman crouched on that branch, and then it clicked in his head. That power is exactly how the elf keeps rejuvenating himself. And it's brutal. The longer this fight drags on, the more the enemy bounces back, while he and his allies get ground down to nothing. His opponent snaps to it and admits the swordsman has him read, then he hurls the truth out loud. His forbidden curse, Soul Drain. Sure, it eats in huge amounts, but the efficiency is painfully bad. He lays out the brutal price in full. If he wants to turn back just 1 year, he has to siphon the lives of dozens of humans, and he admits straight up it's honestly a total drag. His face snaps into manic joy as he blurts out, "If I can just get the true power of the world tree, I'll live for ages and run my life way more efficiently." Disgust floods his face as the swordsman spits that he's absolute scum. No sympathy, none at all, until the elf snaps back that he's just chasing a long life like every other elf. Then the elf unleashes a swirling vortex of energy, but the swordsman slams up a shadow barrier that crushes the attack in a thunderous explosion. The blast slams the swordsman to the ground, beaten, and he spits curses at how powerless he is. Then Maniana barrels into the rocky clearing, shouting his name with worry in her voice. Meanwhile, at the World Tree, Lady Tiara gasps in horror as she reaches out, because the forest is already overrun, and dread tells her the real question. How much of the sacred tree's elf lore has the thing already swallowed? She can only stare as the masked swordsman, still sprawled on the ground, tells her it'll all be okay, and ends soon. Confused, shaken to the core, she can't help but blurt out, "Why?" Her question snaps into something sharper, and her voice trembles as she demands to know why, out of all people, he's guarding her, and he starts by denying it, then hesitates, admitting that if he absolutely had to name a reason, he could. He starts explaining it, because for years she's meant something exactly asterisk to him. Old memories rising to the surface, her face from long ago, and the moments of real joy and care she gave as a mother holding her child. He finishes with pure intensity, saying that in his eyes she's always looked like someone begging for help. Then the words hit her like a shockwave, and she goes completely silent, cheeks blazing as she barely whispers his name. He tells them his reason, then swings that jagged blade hard, slicing through the shadowy tendrils that writhe up from the corrupted ground toward him. As the fight rages on, she clamps down on her thoughts and faces the truth. She doesn't actually want to die, and her vow to save her daughter was never a lie. She remembers pitching the idea of becoming a substitute, and the other elves instantly shower her with praise. Right in the middle of that worshipful buzz, a cold truth hits. They're not planning to stop her at all. Hemmed in by her own expectations, she refused to retreat. Then, in a quiet confession to herself, she admitted it. After 1,000 years of living, being scared of dying felt mortifying. She's dead sure living long doesn't erase the fear of death, it hammers it harder. And then 3 brutal, powerful enemies just show up out of nowhere, turning her terror up to full volume. These were the thoughts she swore she'd never say out loud, the words she'd already stopped trying to speak. The name she carried, the weight of being the eldest elf and a mother, and it all felt like iron shackles, strangling every chance to admit weakness. Her tears poured as she clutched the fabric to her heart, finally losing her composure. Voice trembling with raw emotion, she blurted out, "Please, is it really okay for someone like me to say it at last? Help me." Before she could even finish her sentence, the masked swordsman's voice sliced through the air with total certainty. Then he barked at her to get help, no limits, hold back nothing. His words hit her like a punch, one tear slid down her cheek, and then she snapped into resolve, her face hardening as she made her choice. At that exact moment, her voice snapped sharp and thundered over the battlefield. "Help me, Demo-chan," she cried, turning the swordsman's grim resolve into something unbreakable. The elf guard spits insults at the masked swordsman, sneering that his whole fight is pathetic. With a cold grin, he orders him to ditch Tiara, calling her a 1,000-year-old crone, and the words ignite rage in the swordsman's chest. The masked fighter surges forward, but the guard just shuts him down with an effortless parry. The moment their blades collide, something eerie snaps into place. The elf's long hair turns to stone in an instant, then explodes into shards, and the masked swordsman freezes, staring in pure shock, completely thrown by what just happened. The elf guard shoots a glance down at his own palm, and there, bursting with light, is a glowing sigil he just summoned, and he grins like, of course the elven magic makes things this easy. Clarence's bout is done. Once he lands that hit, a brutal surge detonates from his palm and smashes the swordsman straight in the throat. The swordsman gasps like his heir's been stolen, eyes bulging with raw pain and shock as the elf's hand tightens around his throat. The impact blasts him backward and he tumbles helplessly over the cliff edge, while the elf guard just stares and mutters, "Oops," like it barely matters. Tiara screams his name from afar as his body slams into the ground below, blasting up a vicious cloud of dust and wreckage. Selfguard erupts into a hearty laugh at the sight, mocking the swordsman's pathetic end after all that big talk, while Tiara drops to her knees beside the fallen man, her face etched with raw concern. He stares at his hand, feeling the magic he just swallowed, but the hit doesn't satisfy. Sure, it's high quality, yet the amount is way smaller than he thought it would be. As the elf guard freezes in confusion, the swordsman's eyes snap wide, because he knows deep down this is exactly how it was always going to end. He spots the forbidden soul-draining spell in an instant. He's seen it over and over. And then it clicks, he finally realizes why the yield is so low. He compressed his magic before casting. He keeps talking, admitting the elf guard's absorption power is terrifying. Then he snaps his focus to the weakness. The guard's limit is real, and any extra magic he takes in gets blasted out into the air through his right arm. His lesson keeps going, and suddenly he's back in his head with Tiara, how magic won't just take on command. It all comes down to the power he senses rolling toward him, not some automatic rule. Then he leans in and fires a chilling question at the elf. What happens when the magic decides, we can absorb this? And the moment it commits, the surge swells and slams back like a full-on volley. Then he blurts out his exact move. Somehow, his magic control is freakishly good. During the fight, he shoved a chunk of his own power straight into his body, and the elf guard can only gape, utterly stunned and wide-eyed. He jeers at the elf's short-sightedness. And before the setup even clicks, the guard tries to swallow the tiny, compressed magic point, taking it all in instead of pushing it out. The elf guard stammers, staring in shock as the veins on his arm bulge. Once the explanation ends, his face hardens. He clenches his fist and roars that he's finally ready to unleash the compression. The moment the power drops, it hits like lightning. Magic floods the elf guard's arm so hard it grotesquely swells as the overwhelming force rips apart the flesh from the inside. Unstable energy detonates with a blinding flash, and the sheer blast slams the elf guard back, sending him rocketing through the air like he's been launched. After the blast, the elf guard howls in agony, gripping the mangled stump of his right arm. His strongest soul drain is gone for good. As he speeds away, Pina, the winged girl, swoops in and throws a coat over the swordsman, and he finally admits the truth. He'd secretly loaded her mana into his demon sword beforehand. He tilts his head just a little, and that razor-sharp stare pins his defeated opponent. Sweat beads down his temple like it's burning there. Meanwhile, the elf guard drops to the dirt, crushed and shaking his head in disbelief, cursing that if he'd just taken the old elf hag, everything would have gone right, until a voice from nowhere snaps his attention. His defeat was total. Then the masked swordsman loomed over him, voice dripping menace, and demanded why the guard was still calling Tiara Mama an old hag. The elf could barely get words out, eyes bulging with pure terror. He snapped apart on the spot, spilling apologies and begging for mercy. And in a last-ditch bid to calm her down, he swore he'd finally say Tiara Mama the right way, just like the swordsman had.